In the golden age of silent cinema, where the world was introduced to a new form of entertainment, one man stood out as a pioneer, a visionary, and an unparalleled master of comedic timing. This man was Harold Lloyd. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're uncovering Green Acres in Beverly Hills, California. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Harold Lloyd's story begins in 1893 when he was born to a working-class family in Burchard, Nebraska. His childhood, however, was far from ordinary. Even as a young boy, Lloyd was fascinated by the world of theater, often experimenting with makeup to create different characters, a foreshadowing of the many faces he would later present to the world. In 1910, when Harold was just 17, his life took a dramatic turn. After a series of failed business ventures, his parents divorced and Lloyd relocated with his father to San Diego, California. This move was the catalyst that set him on the path to stardom. In San Diego, Harold attended high school, but his heart was already set on the stage. He joined various repertory companies, honing his craft and developing a love for performance that would shape his future career. Lloyd's big break came when he decided to try his luck in Hollywood, the burgeoning heart of the film industry. He began working with Thomas Edison's motion picture company, and his first role was as a background character in The Old Monk's Tale. It was a modest start, but it opened the door to the world of film. In Los Angeles, Harold's persistence and ingenuity soon paid off. Unable to gain entry into the Universal Studio, he disguised himself with makeup and slipped past the gatekeepers, a move as clever as any of his later on-screen antics. This resourcefulness caught the attention of Hal Roach, a young filmmaker with whom Lloyd would form a lifelong friendship, leading to innumerable collaborations. Together, Lloyd and Roach created the character Lonesome Luke, a comic figure inspired by the immense popularity of Charlie Chaplin's Tramp. Lonesome Luke was a man of exaggerated features, loud clothes, a false mustache, and an air of absurdity. Though successful, Lloyd felt constrained by the character, realizing that to truly leave a mark on the world, he needed to create something new, something that wasn't a copy of another successful star, something that was uniquely his. In 1917, he took a bold step that would define his career. He shed the outlandish persona of Lonesome Luke and introduced a new character that was far more relatable, a bespectacled young man simply known as Harold, who was just like the boy next door. This character, with his trademark horn-rimmed glasses, was an everyman, a figure of optimism and determination, who faced life's challenges with a mix of bravery and naivety. The glasses were more than just a prop, they were a symbol of the character's humanity and approachability. Lloyd later reflected, and quote, "When I adopted the glasses, it more or less put me in a different category because I became a human being. He was a kid that you would meet next door, across the street, but at the same time, I could still do all the crazy things that we did before, but you believed them. They were natural, and the romance could be believable." With this new persona, Lloyd quickly rose to fame. His films were a blend of comedy, romance, and adventure, often featuring thrill sequences that left audiences on the edges of their seats. Perhaps the most iconic of these is the scene in Safety Last, where Lloyd hangs precariously from the hands of a clock high above a busy city street. This image has since become one of the most enduring in cinematic history. Fun antics aside, Lloyd's career was not without its perils. On August 24th of 1919, while posing for a promotional photograph, a tragic accident nearly ended his life. Mistaking a live explosive for a prop, Lloyd lit the fuse, resulting in an explosion that severely injured his right hand. He lost his thumb and index finger, and his face was badly burned. For a moment, the world held its breath, fearing that the rising star's career had been extinguished. But Lloyd's indomitable spirit would not be so easily defeated. After all, he had made it out of a small town in Nebraska to the silver screen. He never let the public see his pain or struggle, concealing his injuries with a special prosthetic glove that was nearly undetectable on screen. This accident only seemed to fuel his determination, and he returned to filmmaking with renewed vigor, creating some of the most memorable work in the years that followed. The 1920s were a golden era for him. With hits like Grandma's Boy, The Freshman, and Speedy, he became one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, earning both critical acclaim and a vast fortune. The story of Green Acres begins in 1923 when Harold Lloyd, at the height of his fame, purchased a parcel of land that had long belonged to the Benedict family. This land, nestled in the heart of Beverly Hills, was to be the canvas on which Lloyd would paint his masterpiece. He wasn't interested in mere luxury. Lloyd sought to create a world unto himself where every corner of the property would offer something magical. To bring his vision to life, Lloyd enlisted the talents of architects Summer Spalding and Walter Weber. Together they designed a 44-room mansion that would blend the grandeur of French and Italian Renaissance styles with the warmth and charm of a Hollywood star's home. Construction began in 1927, and by 1928, Green Acres had risen from the earth as a 45,000 square foot testament to Lloyd's larger-than-life persona. But it was the grounds of Green Acres that truly set it apart. Harold Lloyd was not content with simply having a mansion. He wanted his estate to be a living, breathing fairy tale. He collaborated with landscape architect A.E. Hansen, who transformed the 15-acre property into a botanical wonderland. The result was a series of themed gardens that seemed to transport visitors to different worlds, each more magical than the last. Imagine strolling through a tropical forest only to find yourself suddenly in a formal rose garden, the air thick with the scent of blooming flowers. Turn a corner and you might stumble upon a sunken garden, its lush greenery hiding you from the outside world. A cascading waterfall fed a 900-foot-long canoe stream where you could paddle your way through the estate as if in a dream. Lloyd's love for sports and entertainment was evident throughout the property. A 9-hole golf course meandered across the grounds, providing both a challenge and a picturesque view. The estate also boasted tennis courts, an outdoor bowling green, and even regulation-sized handball court, perfect for a star who was as passionate about physical activity as he was about making people laugh. For as spectacular as this estate is already, we haven't even set foot inside. We'll enter the home below the grand staircase, stepping up into the double-height entry hall marked by a fireplace at the far end of the room. In the dining room, we can imagine the who's who of Hollywood gathering to share meals in understated elegance. And holidays in this mansion were fabled for being completely over the top, in exactly the way you might expect his larger-than-life persona to celebrate. Meandering about the mansion, we'll find long hallways tastefully decorated with antique tapestries and artwork by the old masters. His living room was finished out with half-height wood paneling and a massive floor-to-ceiling fireplace flanked by diamond-paned windows. The music room became a hub for private performances, as musical artists tinkered at the piano between cocktails. Life at Green Acres was good, but the good times couldn't last forever. As the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, Lloyd faced a new challenge, the advent of sound and cinema. While many silent film stars struggled to adapt, Lloyd embraced the change. He remade his 1929 film, Welcome Danger, as a talkie, and the result was a financial success, proving that Lloyd's charm transcended the limitations of silent film. However, the transition to sound marked the beginning of a slow decline in his career. The Great Depression altered the landscape of American cinema, and Lloyd's optimistic, go-getter persona seemed increasingly out of touch with the audience grappling with economic hardship. His films became less frequent, and by the late 1930s, Lloyd had largely stepped away from the screen. Though his film career had waned, Harold Lloyd's life was far from over. He redirected his energy into other passions, including photography. He was also deeply involved in charitable work, particularly with the Shriners Hospital, a cause close to his heart after overcoming his own serious injuries. He passed away in 1971 at the age of 77, but his legacy was far from forgotten. In the years that followed his death, there was a renewed interest in his work, spurred on by documentaries, retrospectives, and the release of his films on television and home video. Today, Harold Lloyd is celebrated as one of the greatest comedians of the silent film era, right alongside Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. As for Green Acres, while the once vast lands have been subdivided to an extent, the mansion, along with several key elements of its grounds, continues to stand to this day as a private residence. Happy House was at one point among the largest Gilded Age mansions ever built in California, but despite its joyous name, something sinister happened to it. This is the story of Milbrae and the Happy House of Tragedy. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1825, Darius Ogden Mills was born in New York. He arrived in California as a 23-year-old adventurer just as the gold rush was underway in 1849. Instead of panning for gold himself, he famously focused on what he called mining the miners, providing goods and financial services to those seeking their fortune. According to one account, when the stampede of gold seekers reached Sacramento, there was Darius with a supply of picks and shovels ready to sell. In his first year as a Sacramento shopkeeper, Mills turned a modest $5,000 investment into $40,000 in profit, an astounding success for the time. Buoyed by his reputation for honesty and armed with a massive iron safe he'd brought from New York, Mills soon began safeguarding miners' gold in deposit, effectively becoming a banker. His makeshift enterprise grew into the Bank of D.O. Mills and Company, providing secure banking to gold rush entrepreneurs. By 1864, his banking prowess led him to co-found the Bank of California in San Francisco, and he served as its president. This bank, a forerunner to today's Union Bank, became the lead financial institution in the West. financing mining operations in Nevada's legendary Comstock lode. Mills also invested in infrastructure to support mining. For example, he was part owner of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, which transported ore from Virginia City's mines to the Central Pacific Railroad line. By the late 1860s and 1870s, Mills had parlayed gold rush profits into a financial empire spanning banking, railroads, and mining investments. For a time, he was reputed to be the richest man in California, with a fortune that would eventually be valued in the tens of millions, equivalent to nearly $1 billion today. At this point, he began turning his attention to family and philanthropy. Back in 1854, Mills had married Jane Templeton Cunningham, and together they had 2 children. As his wealth grew, Mills sought to build a legacy home where his family could enjoy the good life. In the mid-1860s, at the height of his success, he set out to create a grand country estate on the peninsula south of San Francisco, an estate that would become known as Millbray's Happy House. Darius Ogden Mills began acquiring land for his dream estate around 1860, purchasing acreage from the old land grant in San Mateo County. Eventually, he assembled a 1,500-acre property which he named Millbray, a combination of mills and bray, the Scottish word for hill. On this rolling expanse, Mills set out to construct one of the most magnificent mansions in California. He commissioned the unfortunately named architectural firm Diper and Seltzer to design a grand Italianate villa in the latest fashion. The result was a 3-story mansion with a striking mansard roof, tall arch windows, and ornate detailing. Construction was a massive undertaking. The project took 3 years and was completed in 1869. The finished mansion boasted 42 rooms, encompassing about 44,000 square feet, making it one of the largest private homes in North America at the time. To complement the architecture, Mills hired renowned landscape architect John McLaren, famed designer of San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. McLaren created manicured gardens with exotic plants, winding paths, and conservatories bursting with rare flowers. Of these, there is a substantial glass conservatory attached to the mansion, a popular Victorian-era feature for displaying tropical plants. It housed imported trees, fountains, and exotic flowers, an oasis of green that locals would later recall as a botanical wonderland. Inside, Happy House was no less extravagant. Mills enlisted the services of the Herder Brothers of New York, one of the most exclusive interior design firms of the Gilded Age. When the mansion was first furnished, Herder Brothers outfitted it in sumptuous Renaissance Revival style, with carved woodwork, gilded moldings, and luxurious furniture to match the grand architecture. A few years later, in 1880, the firm returned to update the interiors, incorporating the latest trends. Every room was filled with fine art and custom furniture. Family lore even holds that many furnishings were procured from the 1867 Paris Exposition, bringing continental elegance to California. Continuing this lore, some of the estate's features are the stuff of legend. For instance, Mills built a private carriage road to the mansion, complete with a gatekeeper's lodge at the entrance to welcome visitors. A spacious carriage house and stables served the family's horses and ornate carriages. There was even a fully functioning dairy farm on the property, complete with herds of cows in a model dairy barn, which reportedly produced nearly 300,000 gallons of milk for San Francisco markets over the estate's lifetime. Despite such grandeur, the Mills family gave their palace a homey moniker. They affectionately called it Happy House. Interestingly, Happy House was never the family's primary residence year-round. Darius Mills and his wife Jane used it mainly as a country retreat. Mills kept business interests in San Francisco and later in New York, so the mansion often sat quiet except during holiday seasons or special occasions. By the early 1880s, Darius Ogden Mills had achieved almost everything a man of his era could hope for. Having built the Bank of California and amassed one of the largest fortunes in the West, Mills decided to retire from active business on the West Coast. In 1880, at age 55, he returned to New York to focus on his investments and philanthropic pursuits back east. Settling into the life of a gentleman financier, Mills helped develop notable buildings in Manhattan, such as the Mills Building in the Financial District, and became a patron of institutions like the Metropolitan Museum of Art and Columbia University. In 1910, Mills passed away of heart failure at the age of 84 at his Millbray mansion with family at his side. As for Happy House, the mansion lived on under the care of his heirs, but times were changing. His daughter Elizabeth and other family members continued to visit the estate during the 1910s and 1920s. However, when Elizabeth Mills Reed passed away in 1931, the family's use of the mansion sharply declined. By the end of the decade, the aging mansion was rarely used and was becoming something of a white elephant. During World War II, Happy House briefly found a new purpose. The estate was lent to the United Seamen's Service to house merchant marine sailors and convalescing servicemen on leave. In the late 1940s, the family began liquidating the Millbrae estate. Parcels of land had already been sold off earlier and had been subdivided into new suburban neighborhoods like Burlingame's Park and Millbrae's Bayside Manor. In 1953, the bulk of the remaining estate, including the mansion itself, was sold to the Paul W. Truesdale Construction Company, a Los Angeles developer with big plans. At the time, California was in the midst of a post-war housing boom, and the rolling hills of Millbrae were ripe for new subdivisions. Truesdale proposed to level the old estate and build over 2,500 modern homes and $1 million shopping center on the land. Inevitably, this meant that the grand old mansion would have to go. In June 1953, as workers began the process of dismantling parts of the mansion's interior, fate, or perhaps something more sinister, intervened. A fire broke out inside the mansion on June 23, 1954, under mysterious circumstances. The official report pinned the cause on an accident. Workers reportedly using a chainsaw to cut timber had sparked the blaze by igniting old wallpaper or wood. The dry, partially gutted mansion went up like a tinderbox. With the estate's telephone lines already disconnected and hydrants too far away, firefighters were slow to get word of the blaze. By the time fire crews arrived, the inferno was completely out of control. In the aftermath, developers moved quickly to erase the last physical traces of the Mills estate. Bulldozers cleaned up the charred ruins and proceeded to grade the hills, wiping any gardens, lakes, and old-growth trees in favor of roads and house lots. Today, little remains of Happy House beyond photographs, a few saved Herter Brothers furnishings auctioned to collectors, and the legacy of the Mills name. How did California's largest mansion end up buried below a neighborhood? Hi everyone, Ken here. Welcome to this house. In 1826, James Flood was born to poor Irish immigrants on New York's Staten Island. Growing up, he dreamed of becoming rich, but knew that people like him could only dream. After graduating the 8th grade, he left school to apprentice for a carriage maker, a job where he could make an honest living and, if he were lucky, he could one day move up in the company and make enough to provide for a family of his own. After nearly 10 years of making carriages, the reality started to sink in. He would never make enough money to live comfortably. Around this time, stories of men striking it rich in the gold rush began to circulate. With nothing to lose, James, now 23 years old, took what little money he had been able to save and headed out west. Though he did not strike it rich, he was able to find a handful of silver and gold nuggets to bring home with him. Now that James had a little bit of money, he decided to propose to his longtime sweetheart back in New York. Mary Leary said yes, and in no time at all, the couple said I do. Feeling luckier than ever, James and Mary moved to San Francisco and continued searching for gold. By 1857, they had given up on the idea of finding enough gold to retire on, so James invested most of his savings in opening a saloon with his new business partner and friend, William S. O'Brien. The business grew rapidly, and by the next year, they had sold the saloon and used the profits to open a stock brokerage. This endeavor went pretty smoothly for James and William, and by the next year, they were ready to expand. They joined forces with a mining engineer and a mine superintendent and shifted their interests from California to Nevada, where silver had just been discovered. The team pooled their money together to purchase claims and issued stocks, giving them enough buying power for what would come next. By 1873, the business partners were able to purchase a majority stake of the Consolidated Virginia Mining Company, and later in that same year, their investment paid off more than they could ever have imagined, with the uncovering of the Comstock lode. Not only did they find silver in the mines, it would become the largest lode in history. The Big Bonanza, as it was called, consisted of a silver core stretching 1,200 feet deep into the earth. When James announced the discovery, the mines were valued at $1 billion, the modern-day equivalent of over $25 billion. What followed was a frenzy in the stock market, and James saw an opportunity to manipulate the price of stocks as he learned new information about his mines. When it was all said and done, the mine produced about 1/10 of its estimated value before becoming unprofitable. But with his insider knowledge, James was able to cash in long before the mines became unprofitable. Starting in 1875, he diversified his fortune by buying up real estate and founding the Nevada Bank with William. This series of events culminated in cementing James Flood's place in the top 100 wealthiest Americans of all time. With his wealth, he set out to build his dream home. He purchased a large lot in Menlo Park, modern-day San Francisco, and constructed his 45,000 square foot mansion, which he named Linden Towers. The colossal, 6-story Italianate palace was clad in limestone and embellished with intricate relief work and statuary. As we arrive from the street, the gatekeeper steps out from the gatehouse to greet us. The short side of the mansion comes into full view as we round the fountain, but we still have a long way to go before arriving at the front door. We must make our way down the winding gravel drive, meandering through lush gardens. This takes us past a herd of cows grazing in the pastures just outside of the barn. Then, reaching off into the distance, we wonder where the garden walks might take us. Looking beyond the stone sphinx, terraced gardens break away from expansive lawns until finally, Linden Towers can be seen coming into full view. Let's dismount from our carriage and make our way towards the front door. But before we go inside, let's zoom out to see the grandeur of the palatial mansion we are about to enter. Swinging open the nearly 12-foot tall front doors, we arrive in the entrance hall, hearing the echoes of our footsteps dance across the marble mosaic floor. As we look straight ahead, the main hall stretches more than 100 feet below gilded ceilings shimmering in the light of gold-plated chandeliers. To the right, the smell of old leather-bound books tempts us into the library with hand-tooled leather walls and a ceiling that has been gold-leafed between its polished ebony beams. The library feeds into the music room, where a grand piano is so well polished that it reflects the sun's light back into our faces. Directly across the main hall from the music room is the drawing room. Here we could find antique European chairs set out, one for each expected guest. And above us, on the ceiling, a dramatic, ecclesiastical mural is framed by intricate hand stenciling. Let's make our way back into the main hall, heading all the way to the end and turning left just before the door to the service wing. This brings us to the dining room, dramatically decorated with angels flying about overhead in the ceiling mural, and gilded dragons resting behind the table supporting the fireplace's mantel. Though, for a more casual dinner, the Floods could eat in their breakfast room in the service wing. Unfortunately, there are no known photos of the stair hall, Moorish smoking room, service wing, or the children's dining room, but we can continue exploring the mansion from below the dome of the second-floor stair hall. James' bedroom was decorated with an eclectic mix of styles, ranging from centuries-old furniture pieces to a unique mix of Eastlake and Baroque detailing. Mary's bedroom was more cohesive, with a matching bedroom set and a lively frieze running below murals framed by hand-stenciled borders. Her suite came complete with a large fireplace centered between windows and only the finest, hand-sewn quilts and curtains money could buy. While no two bedrooms were identical, each one bore a strong resemblance to the last, with a writing desk in the middle of each room and canopies over each bed. Once completed, Linden Towers became the largest house west of the Rocky Mountains, but even so, the Floods spent very little time in it, only using the mansion to host large parties. They chose to instead live in their Nob Hill mansion in San Francisco. When James passed away in 1889, he left both of the mansions to his daughter Jenny. She had no use for Linden Towers and decided to donate it to the University of California, who later sold the mansion to James Flood Jr. After his passing, Jr.'s widow placed the estate up for auction. Developers then purchased the estate and began selling the furniture and architectural salvage. This behemoth of a mansion would have been too costly to tear down and haul away, so the house was imploded and its remains were packed into the foundation and low points around the property before new houses and apartments were built over them. Somewhere below the Lindenwood housing development are the fragments of some of the finest artisan work California has ever seen, resting on marble floors covered over with 10 feet of dirt. High above Beverly Hills in the 1920s stood a lavish hilltop estate known as Enchanted Hill, home of one of Hollywood's most dazzling power couples, Fred Thompson and Frances Marion. Fred Thompson was a silent-era cowboy hero, while Frances Marion was one of Hollywood's most celebrated screenwriters, among the highest paid of her time. Together they rose from humble beginnings to fabulous fame and fortune, and poured their success into building a dream mansion that epitomized the glamour of their era. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Fred Thompson's path to movie stardom was anything but typical. Born in 1890 in Pasadena, he excelled not only in looks and charm, but in brains and brawn. He was a Princeton-educated minister and a world-class athlete who set track and field records before finding fame on the silver screen. During World War I, Thompson served as a U.S. Army chaplain, but fate intervened when he broke his leg in a friendly football game at Camp Kearney in 1917, landing him in a military hospital. There, Hollywood sweetheart Mary Pickford came to visit wounded soldiers, and brought along her close friend, screenwriter Frances Marion. The moment Frances met Fred in that hospital ward, sparks flew. She later joked that as a writer, she'd been cynical about love at first sight until it happened to her. Within days, the pair were planning to marry. They became engaged before Thompson shipped out to France, and when the war ended, the two wed soon after. It was the start of a partnership that would soon conquer Hollywood. Frances Marion was already a force in the film industry by the time she and Thompson married in 1919. Born in 1888, she had blazed trails as a scenarist and screenwriter in the 1910s, penning hit films for stars like Mary Pickford. By 1917, Marion was reportedly one of the highest-paid writers in Hollywood. She even served as a war correspondent in Europe in 1918, further proving her mettle. Sharp, witty, and creative, Marion was instrumental in elevating screenwriting into an art form, and she would go on to win 2 Academy Awards in the early 1930s for her work. In the late 1910s, however, she was better known as the brilliant writer behind Hollywood's biggest silent dramas. Marrying Fred Thompson added a new dimension to her life and career, as the couple quickly became a Hollywood power couple who often collaborated on projects. Thompson's film career took off thanks in part to Marion's influence and Hollywood connections. Initially, Fred had been more interested in directing, but he made his acting debut in a film Frances wrote, Just Around the Corner, and also appeared in The Love Light, a Mary Pickford vehicle that Frances wrote and directed. Audiences responded to Thompson's all-American good looks and athletic charisma. Soon he found his niche as a Western cowboy hero, complete with a trusty equine sidekick, a splendid Palomino horse named Silver King. By the mid-1920s, Fred Thompson was one of the movie industry's top box office draws. In fact, he became the number 2 box office star in America for 1926 and 1927, commanding an astounding salary of about $10,000 per week at his peak, the modern equivalent of nearly $10 million per year. He performed many of his own stunts on horseback and developed a huge fan following among audiences who thrilled to his daredevil style. In short, by the late 1920s, Fred Thompson was a major Hollywood star, and along with Frances Marion, he was also getting very rich. Meanwhile, Frances Marion's career in the 1920s was just as stellar. She wrote a string of successful films throughout the decade, from family dramas to romances. For example, she scripted Lightnin' and Stella Dallas, as well as the Rudolph Valentino blockbusters Son of the Sheik and an acclaimed adaptation of The Scarlet Letter. Marion's screenwriting prowess made her indispensable in Hollywood. She was friends with all the top stars and had creative control that few writers of the era enjoyed. In an industry dominated by men, she stood out as a trailblazing woman at the top of her field. By 1925, this power couple had the talent, fame, and wealth that most could only dream of. And so naturally, they set out to build a home that would match their outside success. When Frances and Fred began planning their dream home, they envisioned a cozy hacienda, but it quickly evolved into something far more grandiose. In 1921, the Thompsons purchased a 4-acre parcel of land atop Angelo Drive in the hills above Beverly Hills. The site commanded sweeping views of Los Angeles and lay secluded above Benedict Canyon. However, as their fortunes grew, so did their ambitions for the house. Fred's burgeoning movie career had a unique side effect. He kept acquiring more horses to serve as stunt doubles and companions for Silver King. Housing and training that many horses required an expansive stable and plenty of land, so the Thompsons bought up more adjoining acreage to create a proper equestrian estate. What began as a modest plan for a farmhouse swelled into designs for a veritable compound, complete with large stables, groom's quarters, a so-called cowboy's house, riding rings, and acres of gardens and pastures. To execute their vision, Fred and Frances turned to a young architect named Wallace Neff, who specialized in the Spanish Revival style that was all the rage in California. Neff took over the project in 1924 and transformed the Thompsons' increasingly elaborate wish list into a cohesive design, and the result was spectacular. By 1925, construction was complete on what Frances Marion unabashedly admitted was the largest house on the highest hill in Beverly Hills. They affectionately christened it the Enchanted Hill, a dreamy yet fitting name for their fantastical new estate. Enchanted Hill was a masterpiece of Spanish-inspired architecture blended with Hollywood flair. Though newly built, the mansion was designed to look as if it had stood for centuries. Neff modeled it after an Andalusian cuartillo, transplanting old-world charm onto a Southern Californian hilltop. The main house was a rambling 2-story structure of white stucco, red-tiled roofs, and arcaded loggias arranged around a central cobbled courtyard. Visitors approached via a long, winding private road up the canyon. At the entrance, guests passed under a stone archway into the courtyard, which featured a bubbling fountain of hand-painted Mexican tiles at its center and lush plantings of cacti, bird of paradise, and exotic flowers around the edges. In true Spanish style, a gatekeeper's lodge stood by the arch, giving the estate an air of a secluded villa. Stepping through the heavy wooden front door, one entered a grand hall that soared 2.5 stories high to painted blue rafters in the ceiling. Straight ahead, a wide masonry arch led into the enormous living room, an impressive salon with a cathedral ceiling and gigantic arch windows framing panoramic views of the surrounding countryside. The estate's amenities were, in a word, sumptuous. Outside the main house, the Thompsons had installed a 100-foot swimming pool on one of the terraces, an enormous pool by the standards of the day, alongside a tiled barbecue pit and an aviary filled with exotic birds. For a time, Fred Francis truly lived a Hollywood fairy tale on the Enchanted Hill, but real life intruded with a tragedy that shocked Tinseltown. In early December 1928, at the height of his fame, 38-year-old Fred Thompson stepped on a rusty nail while working in a stable. The minor puncture wound led to a tetanus infection, which doctors initially misdiagnosed as something harmless. Within days, Fred's condition worsened dramatically, and on Christmas Day 1928, the beloved cowboy star passed away at a Los Angeles hospital. Hollywood was stunned. Thompson's funeral was packed with industry greats. Pallbearers included comedy legend Harold Lloyd and swashbuckling star Douglas Fairbanks, while honorary pallbearers like Buster Keaton also paid respects. Frances was devastated by the loss of her husband and partner. The couple had 2 young sons, a toddler and an infant, and Frances suddenly found herself a widowed mother. Heartbroken, she could not bear to remain in the palatial home that she and Fred had built together, and within weeks, the grieving Frances decided to put Enchanted Hill up for sale, saying the place held too many painful memories for her alone. In mid-1929, barely half a year later, Enchanted Hill sold. The magnificent estate passed through a series of new owners and an uncertain future. Oilman Ellis Barnes, who bought it from Marion, kept the property for over a decade. In 1945, the estate found a devoted new steward, Paul Kolsman, a German-American inventor. Under his ownership, the property was preserved largely as it was in the 1920s, a rare time capsule of old Hollywood grandeur that he enjoyed for several decades. Then in 1997, the Enchanted Hill property was sold to a new owner with very deep pockets, Microsoft billionaire Paul Allen. What happened next remains a sore point for lovers of historic architecture. Rather than preserve the old mansion, Allen opted to demolish it. The grand mansion by Wallace Neff, the guest house, the stables with their mahogany floors, the terrace gardens and orchards, all of it was bulldozed into oblivion. Allen reportedly had plans to build an enormous modern complex on the site, but ultimately he never did. As of today in 2025, Enchanted Hill remains essentially raw land. Imagine waking up in the morning with only a couple dollars in your bank account and going to sleep as one of the richest people in the country. Hi everyone, Ken here. This is the story of Edward Doheny and his Los Angeles mansion. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Born in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin in 1852, Doheny grew up in a family of modest means. His father, an Irish immigrant, worked as a laborer and gardener, instilling in young Edward a strong work ethic. Despite the family's struggles, Doheny excelled academically, graduating as the valedictorian of his high school class at just 15 years old. However, his father's untimely death soon after thrust him into the harsh realities of adulthood. Doheny's early adult life was filled with struggle, barely making enough money to get by. He joined the U.S. Geological Survey, which took him to the wild frontiers of Kansas, South Dakota, and eventually the rugged landscapes of Arizona and New Mexico. It was here, in the rough and tumble mining towns of the Southwest, that Doheny honed his skills as a prospector and miner. Despite years of hard work, success eluded him, and by the early 1890s, he found himself in Los Angeles living paycheck to paycheck to support his family. However, his fortunes would soon take a dramatic turn. Inspired by reports of natural asphalt deposits in the area, he and his soon-to-be business partner, Charles A. Canfield, decided to try their luck in the nascent oil industry. With little more than sheer determination and second-hand tools, Doheny began digging a well near downtown Los Angeles. The work was grueling and the odds were against them, but in 1892, after months of labor, the duo struck oil. This discovery marked the beginning of Southern California's petroleum boom, and Doheny quickly became a wealthy man. His success in Los Angeles was just the beginning. In 1901, he ventured south to Mexico, where he drilled the country's first oil well near Tampico, which turned the page to an even greater chapter in his career, as his operations in Mexico's Golden Belt would soon make him one of the world's leading oil producers. Doheny's company, Pan American Petroleum and Transport, expanded rapidly with holdings that stretched from the Gulf Coast of the United States to the vast oil fields of Venezuela. With this newfound wealth, Doheny set out to find his dream home in that same year. In 1901, Doheny made a significant move that symbolized his ascent to the upper echelons of Los Angeles' society by purchasing an opulent residence at No. 8 Chester Place for $120,000 in cash. Chester Place at the time was rapidly becoming one of the most desirable and exclusive neighborhoods in the city, filled with the homes of Los Angeles' most influential and affluent citizens. The Doheny home was no exception, and it quickly became a focal point of the area. The mansion, originally built with 22 rooms in 1899, was already grand, but Edward and his wife Estelle had even grander visions. They immediately began extensive renovations, transforming the house into a 24,000 square foot masterpiece that would become one of the most extravagant mansions in Los Angeles. Photos of the home were published in a popular magazine, which brought sightseers by the home at all hours. To gain a bit more privacy and put more space between tourists and his home, Doheny purchased the 13 remaining lots in the private neighborhood. Entering the mansion will place us in the Great Hall, however, this is not where we'll start our tour. Arriving as guests, the doorman would usher us beyond velvet curtains into the reception room. Here we get a small taste of the family's wealth, though the rooms we are about to see will put this one to shame. Of these grand spaces, the Pompeian room will be our first stop, clad in marble with a domed skylight soaring 2 stories overhead. Grand banquets would be held in this room, with fresh flowers overflowing the table setting. Looking more closely at the details, we find intricate stonework, brocade finishing the walls, and sculptures set in the corners. Hearing the gentle strums of a harp, we will venture further into the mansion to find the music room. This incredible space not only holds a grand piano, but the walls and ceilings blend together with continuous ornate plasterwork. At the end of the music room, we'll peel back the curtains to reveal the library. But there is more than meets the eye in this unassumingly cozy room. There is another pair of curtains set in the corner. Let's head beyond them. Here we uncover the rare books room, with first edition volumes, some centuries old, neatly organized on each bookshelf. In fact, one could argue that there are several libraries in this house, from Mrs. Doheny's study to the Indian room, aptly named for the murals spanning the frieze, but we won't get caught up in the many reading nooks of the house. Let's continue to the chapel, with enough space for a private church service exclusively for the family. Not too far from here is the second music room, with yet another grand piano. But perhaps we are getting a bit ahead in our tour. Let's return to the public room, starting with the dining room. As you can imagine, a family of such wealth wouldn't prepare their own meals. The full-time staff would cook in a state-of-the-art kitchen, which was updated frequently with the latest and greatest products and appliances. And if the banquet room and formal dining room weren't on the list for the day, the breakfast room would serve as a cozier retreat for the family to enjoy their meals. Each of the bedrooms are just as grand as you might expect, with ornate plasterwork, wood paneling, and even several luxurious en-suites providing the family and guests with the type of comforts only money could buy. However, Doheny's rise to power was not without its discomfort. In the 1920s, he became embroiled in the infamous Teapot Dome scandal, a political bribery case that rocked the nation. He was accused of offering a $100,000 bribe to U.S. Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall in exchange for favorable oil leases. Though Doheny was twice acquitted of bribery charges, the scandal tarnished his reputation and led to a rather turbulent period in his life. And yet, he was able to turn things around again. His philanthropy, particularly in Los Angeles, where he and his wife Estelle donated generously to Catholic schools, churches, and charities, earned him a legacy as a benefactor. And just as the scandal was being forgotten about, 2 bodies were found in his son's Beverly Hills mansion, Greystone, but that's a story for another time. Edward Doheny passed away in 1935, leaving behind a complex legacy as both a pioneering oilman and a central figure in one of the most notorious scandals in American history. And his house rises from the Los Feliz Hills like a ruin rediscovered, its weathered concrete blocks catching the Californian sun in shifting patterns of shadow and light. Up close though, the ancient aura gives way to unmistakably modern intent. Hi everyone, Ken here, hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Frank Lloyd Wright completed Ennis House in 1924, harnessing his restless imagination at a moment when he was eager to move beyond the horizontal prairie houses that had made him famous in the Midwest. California's topography and climate tempted him towards fresh experiments, and the commission from Charles and Mabel Ennis offered the perfect canvas. Wright had lately immersed himself in studies of pre-Columbian architecture drawn to the mass, rhythm, and cosmic symbolism of Maya and Aztec ruins. Rather than copy their ornament, he distilled their spirit into a new construction system he called the textile block. Thousands of modular concrete units cast on site with sand and decomposed granite dug from the very hillside, each pressed with an interlocking geometric relief. When stacked together and laced with steel rods, the blocks formed walls that looked woven rather than laid, turning humble concrete into a kind of three-dimensional tapestry. More than 27,000 of these blocks were fitted into place for Ennis House, their surfaces glimmering like chipped stone in the Los Angeles light. Wright intended every surface, inside and out, to read as one continuous fabric so the pattern never stops. Living room hearth, terrace parapets, bedroom walls, even the stout chimney all carry the same motif. From a distance, the house terraces upward in deliberate stages, recalling a step pyramid and emphasizing Wright's conviction that a building should grow from its site as if it were geological. That principle of organic architecture guided every decision, orienting main rooms towards panoramic city views, carving courtyards and loggias that blur boundaries between shelter and landscape, letting filtered sunlight pour through perforated blocks so that interiors feel dappled and alive. Yet the romance of the idea met the reality of experimentation. Casting concrete by hand was slow, and minor flaws in molds or rebar placement left behind weaknesses. Cracks appeared before the house was even finished, and local earthquakes later deepened them. Water seeped into joints, smog roughened the concrete skin, and over decades, the hill itself nudged the foundations. Still, Wright adored the finished work. Some accounts have him calling it his favorite, and the house quickly stood apart from the Spanish colonial and craftsman homes that peppered 1920s Los Angeles. Visitors arriving by the winding drive first glimpse a fortress-like facade. Making their way through the gate, the viewshed opens up to reveal the city below in the valley. You're then stepping through a compressed foyer that Wright designed to heighten the drama of release into the soaring living room. There a wall of windows frames the metropolis beyond, while a monumental fireplace, its masonry indistinguishable from the surrounding walls, anchors the space like a modern hearth in a Maya temple. A half-flight higher, the dining area perches almost ceremonially, its own patterned walls rising towards the ceiling carved with skylight slots. A covered loggia carries you along the hillside, its floor flickering with the latticed shadows of perforated blocks. Bedrooms unfold in quieter rhythms, the main suite boasting mitered glass corner windows that dissolve the barrier between the interior and the vast basin panorama. Down a stair, a billiard lounge spills out onto a terrace where a 1940s swimming pool mirrors the house's blocky contours in still water, as though continuing the architecture into a liquid plane. The power of these spaces lies in their seamless choreography of solid and void, light and dark. Though nearly everything is concrete, the house never feels inert. Instead, surfaces seem to breathe with changing daylight, and the rooms coax you from intimacy to grandeur in carefully measured steps, and Hollywood soon took notice of this effect. In 1959, Ennis House played a sinister mansion in House on Haunted Hill, its textured walls doubling as ancient stone. 2 decades later, its brooding geometry helped define the dystopian future of Blade Runner. Even interior sets on the soundstage were borrowed from the block motif to lend authenticity. Appearances in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Twin Peaks, fashion shoots, and music videos followed, each reinforcing the house's uncanny ability to slide between periods and genres, just as Wright had fused antiquity and modernity in its very fabric. While cameras loved the house, engineers fretted. The 1994 Northridge earthquake and relentless winter storms left it teetering on structural failure, and by 2005, authorities deemed it unsafe, with a non-profit foundation marshalling grants and private gifts for an emergency rescue. Craftspeople cast new blocks using molds taken from surviving originals. Stainless steel pins stitched cracked walls, subterranean drains whisked runoff away from the hillside, and a concealed steel frame lent the house a spine it had always lacked. Millions of dollars and painstaking years later, Ennis House stood whole again. What endures, beyond the drama of restoration or the thrill of cinematic cameos, is the clarity of Wright's experiment, a single idea pursued to its limits. He imagined concrete, the gutter rat of building materials, raised to the dignity of sculpture. He sought a house that felt quarried from its own hill. He wanted walls that were as much ornament as structure. Ennis House fulfills those ambitions in a way that is both heroic and humanly scaled. Its pattern blocks may evoke a temple, but they also register the hands of the artisans who cast each one, the hillside soil that colors their aggregate, the sun that animates their relief. Standing before the house at dusk, when the block faces glow amber and the city lights kindle below, you sense a dialogue across millennia, ancient builders stacking stone in Yucatan, a 20th century visionary coaxing poetry from concrete. No matter how badly you might want something, there is probably a line you wouldn't cross, morals you wouldn't compromise, and oaths you wouldn't break. But for some people, what we might see as good, or even the bare minimum of decency, is simply a suggestion. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are uncovering Casa Encantada, the Bel Air home of Hilda Bolt-Weber. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Our story begins with Hilda's husband, Charles Bolt. In 1888, at the age of 20, Charles co-founded a small glassworks company in Muncie, Indiana. It quickly grew, and by 1900 he had reorganized the company into the Charles Boldt Glass Company, expanding his operations to Cincinnati, Ohio. There he mass-produced everything from glass bottles to mason jars, shipping them out across the Midwest. He tackled each challenge with poisoned rationality, whether it was settling union disputes or dealing with natural disasters. Under his leadership, the company flourished, and by 1914 he expanded all the way out to West Virginia. Even as Prohibition loomed, he pivoted production to other household wares and remained one of the top glass manufacturers in the world, now covering the nation with factories from the East Coast to the West Coast. At 61 years old, as he looked toward retirement, he brokered a merger and walked away with tens of millions of dollars. Now about his wife, if Charles Boldt was the king of glass, Hilda Boldt was the queen, moving in for a checkmate. A Southern California transplant with a taste for the extraordinary, Hilda married Charles and quickly adapted to his world of industry and innovation. However, their union was far from ordinary. At the age of 61, Charles, who had just started his retirement and was otherwise considered very healthy, passed away suddenly in his sleep, mere weeks after the Owens Bottle Company merger. The official story? Heart complications. But whispers in Cincinnati high society suggested something more sinister. Did Hilda have a hand in her husband's untimely demise, or was she simply a grieving widow left to fend for herself with one of the largest fortunes in America? The truth remains elusive, but Hilda's next move raised some eyebrows. She wasted no time in pursuing her vision of grandeur. She relocated to Southern California, settling in Santa Barbara before commissioning the iconic Casa Encantada in Bel Air in 1936. Designed by James Delena and furnished by T.H. Robsjohn Gibbings, the sprawling, 40,000-square-foot neoclassical estate was an architectural marvel. Costing over $2 million during the Great Depression, the estate symbolized her audacious spirit and yearning for acceptance among the Los Angeles elite. The entire estate was designed to leave a lasting impression, from the grand fountain anchoring the motor court to the many garden paths trailing off beyond vine-covered colonnades and terraces. Following pavers, we wind about the perfectly manicured lawns, between rows of hedges and under lush canopies. Around back we find the pool, marked by giant stone urns and separated by a retaining wall. The pool house stands at the edge of the water, with pavilions and loges creating a private courtyard around the pool. Continuing around towards the house, we find terraces with iron grills blocking tunnels that connect to the private pleasure park from the basement. Some of these terraces are more ornate than others, with intricate stone planters and water features evoking Art Deco design with subtle Greek motifs. Let's return around front and begin making our way inside Casa Encantada. We'll begin our tour from the stair hall, marked by fluted columns and delineated by a rug spanning across parquet wood floors. The grand staircase rounds out behind the columns, with its iron balustrade terminating on an incredibly ornate and freeform newel post. The house is filled with many public rooms where we can imagine Hilda entertaining high society. This one even has a built-in bar where a server would have been stationed during any one of her many soirees. We'll continue now into the living room, clad floor-to-ceiling in wood paneling. Despite its large footprint and lack of overhead lighting, the bay window allows an ample natural sunlight to illuminate the room. Looking more closely at the bay, we find built-in tufted sofas rounding out with the curve of the wall. Next, let's make our way over to the all-white music room, finished out with painted wall panels and massive mirrors. Once again, we can imagine a member of her staff gently serenading the room from the piano nearly every weekend. In the dining room, we find a dramatic contrast between the rich wood paneling and its inlays. Contrasting this further with the furnishings puts us right in the late 1930s at the height of fashion, as the style was rapidly changing from traditional to modern. Of course, Hilda would not have lifted a finger in meal prep, or any other chores for that matter. Her staff would have prepared her every meal and kept the house presentable on a moment's notice. Getting back to the public rooms, all the themes we have seen so far seem to converge on the library. Clean modernist lines paired with traditional embellishments and only the most modern of furnishings. Though her own study was far lighter and set on a more comfortable scale. The house continues on and on with many long halls serving as galleries for Hilda's art collection. We find rotundas with built-in niches and sofas set all over the house. Each room takes on its own unique characteristics, whether it be in the millwork or the artwork. Despite the grand spaces, there were also more relaxed rooms in the house, such as the game room with card tables and a bar for more casual company. Let's return to the grand staircase and make our way up to the second floor to check out some of the bedrooms. Hilda's came complete with an upholstered headboard and matching upholstered wall panels. Even a few more sofas were thrown in the mix with another ceiling height mirror. Each bedroom was more or less finished out in similar styles, though some were a tad more reserved. Despite hosting extravagant soirees and mingling with Hollywood royalty, Hilda's efforts to secure her social standing fell short. The colossal cost of maintaining her estate drained her finances, forcing her to sell Casa Encantada to Conrad Hilton in 1955 for a fraction of its value, a mere $225,000. At this point, her life was essentially over and she sealed her fate the following year. The house ended up changing hands a couple more times and thankfully continues to stand. There are a bunch of pictures of it on Zillow, and honestly, it has been exquisitely maintained and basically appears today as it did back then. When the name Hilton comes to mind, many immediately think of celebrity Paris Hilton, but long before Paris graced the tabloids, her grandfather Baron Hilton was crafting an empire. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are uncovering the Bel Air mansion of Baron Hilton. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Born in 1927 in Dallas, Texas, William Baron Hilton was more than just the heir to his father's hotel empire and the grandfather to Paris Hilton. He was a man of many passions and successful business ventures. By the time he was 17, Baron had already earned his pilot's license, beginning what would become a lifelong love affair with aviation. But flying was just one of Baron's passions. After serving in the Navy during World War II as a photographer, he returned home to focus on his education and, more importantly, his burgeoning business ambitions. Unlike many who are born into wealth, Baron wasn't content to simply rest on the Hilton family name. Before joining the family hotel business, he ventured into a variety of entrepreneurial endeavors. He acquired a distributorship for Vita Pack citrus products in Los Angeles, co-founded McDonald Oil Company, and even launched Air Finance Corporation, one of the first aircraft leasing companies in the US. These early ventures showcased Baron's knack for identifying opportunities and his willingness to take risks, qualities that would define much of his career. In 1954, Baron joined Hilton Hotels as vice president, and it didn't take long for him to make an impact. He developed the Carte Blanche credit card, one of the first travel and entertainment cards, which proved to be a valuable service for Hilton customers. But Baron's ambitions extended beyond the hotel industry. In 1959, he made a surprising move by entering the world of professional sports, helping to found the American Football League. He became the owner of the Los Angeles Chargers, a team he named after the charge cheer often heard at University of Southern California football games. While the Chargers struggled to compete with the more established NFL teams in Los Angeles, Baron made the bold decision to move the franchise to San Diego in 1961, where it became a celebrated staple of the city. Baron's tenure as the Chargers owner was marked by success on the field and innovation off it. Under his leadership, the team won 5 divisional titles and 1 AFL championship. Perhaps his greatest contribution to the sport came in 1966, when he played a key role in the merger between the AFL and the NFL, a deal that would eventually lead to the creation of the Super Bowl. Though he sold his majority stake in the Chargers in 1966 for $10 million, an enormous return on his initial $25,000 investment, his impact on professional football was profound, cementing his legacy as a pioneer in the sport. While his sports ventures were impressive, Baron's true genius emerged when he fully took the reins of Hilton Hotels. In 1966, the board of directors asked him to succeed his father as president and chief executive officer of the company. One of his boldest moves was expanding the company into Las Vegas, a gamble that paid off in spades. In 1970, Baron convinced the board to purchase the International and the Flamingo Hotels, which became the foundation of Hilton's presence in the Nevada gaming industry. Renamed the Las Vegas Hilton and Flamingo Hilton, these properties quickly became central to the city's burgeoning status as the entertainment capital of the world. He was instrumental in bringing world-famous performers like Elvis Presley and Liberace to the Las Vegas Hilton, with Elvis alone performing a record-breaking 837 consecutive sold-out shows. Under Baron's leadership, Hilton Hotels thrived, becoming the first hotel company listed on the New York Stock Exchange to venture into gambling. By 1972, the company's Las Vegas properties accounted for nearly half of its income, a testament to Baron's foresight in tapping into the city's growing appeal. Despite his success in the business world, Baron Hilton's life was not solely defined by his financial achievements. Like his father, he believed deeply in philanthropy. In 1979, when his father passed away, Baron inherited a significant portion of the family fortune, but a substantial part of the Hilton estate was left to the Conrad and Hilton Foundation, a charitable organization established to support humanitarian causes. Baron spent much of his life ensuring that the foundation would continue to grow, and in 2007, he pledged to leave 97% of his estate, an estimated $2.3 billion, to the foundation upon his death. But perhaps that is getting too far ahead in our story. Back in 1961, he purchased the J. Paley House in Bel Air. The 15,100 square foot residence had originally been completed in 1936 and designed by the prolific architect Paul R. Williams. As a side note, Paul Williams was a really interesting architect. He ended up designing over 2,000 mansions for the rich and famous throughout his career, which ran in tandem with segregation laws. Not being allowed to sit on the same side of the table as his white clients, he learned to draw and write upside down as he sketched for his clients across from him. That being said, this is one of those houses which was designed completely upside down. I just thought that was a really interesting footnote, but we can get back to our tour now. The grounds actually predate the house by a few years, though they were designed by the same architect. The pool, which was named the Zodiac Pool, contains an intricate mosaic depicting each zodiac sign in a starburst. Behind the pool house, a series of terraces leads down to the tennis courts. There are also a few other features scattered about, including a long reflecting pool, though because it is completely surrounded by foliage, it is best viewed from the inside. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and enter the house from the front door. The house is H-shaped in plan, with a long hall connecting each wing. We'll start our tour off with the dining room, clad in rich wood paneling, unchanged by the Hiltons for the days of the former occupants. Though this room was for formal use, let's snake through the wing, heading through the side doors. Eventually we'll find the breakfast room, with rounded walls embellished with intricate murals. This is where the Hiltons would have enjoyed meals when not entertaining. Next we'll head into the butler's pantry, which was considered somewhat passé by the time the house was built, but nonetheless very fashionable for the era. This connects to the kitchen with state-of-the-art appliances for the period, though more than likely a private chef would have been the one preparing each meal. Let's make our way back towards the main hall and begin exploring more rooms. We'll come across the same view of the reflecting pool in the sitting room, but turning around, we'll find a massive antique European tapestry dominating the wall below a perfectly fitted coffered ceiling. The fireplace in this room once again harkens back to Gilded Age design trends. There is also a library nearby, with bookshelves worked into simple but refined wood paneling. And though the study had been updated by the Hiltons with mid-century decor, it retained its painted wood paneling and marble mantel. Next we'll find the music room, fully embracing Art Deco design as was incredibly popular at the time the house was built. Baron Hilton passed away on September 19th of 2019 at the age of 91, and the house was sold just 2 years later in 2021 to a former Google CEO. Baron left behind an extraordinary legacy. He had transformed Hilton Hotels into a global powerhouse, pioneered the growth of professional football, and committed his wealth to improving the lives of others through the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. His life was one of ambition, innovation, and generosity, and while the Hilton name is now associated with both luxury hotels and pop culture, Baron's contributions to business and society remain his most enduring legacy. Few Hollywood mansions are as instantly recognizable as the Beverly Estate in Beverly Hills. Movie lovers worldwide have seen its grand facade on screen, most famously in The Godfather, where it served as a palatial home. This iconic cameo was no set designer's creation, but a real 1920s estate with a rich history. Over the past century, the Beverly Estate has been home to bankers, starlets, moguls, hosted presidents and film crews, and evolved from a private dream home into a pop culture icon. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. The story of the Beverly Estate begins with the Getz family in the 1920s. Milton E. Getz, a prominent Los Angeles banker and co-founder of Union Bank, purchased 8 acres of prime land just behind the Beverly Hills Hotel in 1923. He envisioned a magnificent residence for his family, and by 1925 secured permits to construct a 20-plus room dream home on the property. Construction began in 1926 under the guidance of architect Gordon B. Kaufman, one of Southern California's premier residential architects of the era. When completed around 1927, the Getz mansion was a showcase of luxury and thoughtful design. It reportedly cost a modest $7,273 for the land, a bargain even then, and was conceived as more than just a single home. Getz initially subdivided the estate into 3 parcels, one for the main house, an expansive 18,000 square foot mansion, and 2 adjacent plots reserved for his daughters to build homes on when they grew older. The grounds even featured a horseback riding ring for the family's recreation, as well as expansive gardens anchored on cascading pools. We'll first explore the mansion as it was back when it was first built, before seeing how the property appears today. Stepping inside, we pass through the vestibule and arrive in the hall, which spans from one wing to the other with exposed wood beams on the ceiling and Spanish tile finishing the floor. Flanking the hall is the loggia, a light-filled space which leads to the backyard with impressive groin vaults between each archway. To one end is the library, clad in rich wood paneling with built-in bookshelves skirting each level. Directly opposite the library, we'll find the ballroom with a coffered, barrel-vaulted ceiling complete with hand-stenciled accents all set above a herringbone wood floor. To the opposite end of the hall is the dining room, where murals are framed in by fluted pilasters over deep red Spanish tile. In 1946, the Beverly Estate entered a new chapter under the ownership of Marion Davies and William Randolph Hearst, a couple who personified Hollywood's golden age. Marion Davies was a famous actress of the 1920s and 30s, and William Randolph Hearst was the powerful newspaper tycoon who had been Davies' companion for decades. By the mid-1940s, Hearst was in declining health, and the two had spent years living at his remote San Simeon estate known as Hearst Castle. Seeking to be closer to medical care in the Hollywood social world, Davies snatched up the Beverly Hills mansion in 1946 for about $110,000, the modern equivalent of about $1.8 million. Hearst was in his early 80s with serious heart problems, and doctors advised him to reside in Los Angeles near hospitals. Once Marion Davies and Hearst moved in, they made a few tasteful modifications to suit their needs, and if you are a longtime viewer of this channel, it won't come as a surprise to you that they hired architect Julia Morgan, the very designer of Hearst Castle, to oversee some updates. The mansion changed hands a few times, with very minimal changes from that point forward. Beyond its celebrated owners, the Beverly estate earned a special place in pop culture through its Hollywood on-screen legacy. The estate's most famous role is undeniably in The Godfather. The director chose the mansion's elegant exteriors and grounds to portray the home of Jack Woltz, the fictional movie mogul who wakes up to a gruesome surprise in bed. The site of the Beverly estate's grand Spanish-style villa, with its long driveway and stately gates, set the perfect tone for that legendary scene. Ever since, fans have associated the mansion with The Godfather, and it's often simply called the Godfather House. This cinematic cameo cemented the estate's status as an icon, a real piece of Hollywood history as much as a filming location. Fast forwarding to today, the Beverly estate still stands proudly in Beverly Hills, an enduring monument to nearly 100 years of glamour. In recent years, the property has undergone significant restorations to ensure its survival for future generations. After being owned for decades by a businessman who bought it in 1976, the estate was put on the market multiple times in the 2010s, with headline-making price tags. It was even listed at $195 million in 2016, but finding a buyer at that price proved challenging. By 2021, financial difficulties had reportedly led the property into a foreclosure process. The Beverly estate finally found its next steward at a bankruptcy auction in September of 2021, where it was purchased for $63.1 million. Interestingly, that auction sale set a record at the time for homes sold via auction in California. The Beverly estate is currently undergoing a meticulous restoration and subtle modernization. The estate's name was officially reverted to the Beverly estate in 2022 after years of being dubbed the Hearst estate or Beverly House, underscoring a return to its original identity. By all accounts, the Beverly estate today is a grand dame of Beverly Hills, gracefully maturing while being cared for rather than fading away. From its grand beginnings with the Getz family to its star-studded years with Marion Davies and William Randolph Hearst, and from its iconic turn in The Godfather to its revival under a modern patron, the Beverly estate's story is as rich as Hollywood itself. Money can buy you just about anything that is, except for time. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're traveling back to the height of Pasadena's Millionaire's Row to uncover the story of one lady who just couldn't wait any longer. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1849, Eva Scott was born in New York City as the cherished and only child of Leonard and Rebecca Scott. Growing up in a wealthy family afforded her the opportunity to attend Pelham Priory School, New York's first all-girls preparatory school, where she kindled her artistic talents. In the late 1860s, she traveled through Europe and Egypt, studying not only architecture, but also art under renowned painter Sanford R. Gifford. Eva's first marriage to Lieutenant William S. Muse in 1878 brought her daughter Lenora into the world. However, the union dissolved in 1889. 6 years later, she found herself on a second serendipitous trip to Egypt where she met Hungarian nobleman Dr. Adalbert Fenyes, a distinguished neurologist and a pioneer in X-ray technology. The couple married in Budapest 1 year later before making their way to Pasadena, California. Dr. Adalbert Fenyes had been born in 1863 in Hungary as a man of many talents. Educated at the University of Vienna and serving in the court of Franz Joseph, his medical career spanned across continents, bringing us back to Pasadena, where he introduced revolutionary X-ray technology to California. Beyond medicine, Adalbert was an avid entomologist and horticulturist known for his extensive collection of insect specimens and the cultivation of new flower varieties. Upon their arrival in Pasadena, Eva envisioned a home that would reflect her love for Moorish architecture, inspired by her travels in Tunisia, Algeria, and Egypt. In 1896, she acquired 2 lots on South Orange Grove Avenue, known then as Pasadena's Millionaire's Row, and engaged the architectural firm of Denison Farwell to bring her vision to life. Lyman Farwell, a seasoned traveler of Islamic countries, collaborated closely with Eva, translating her sketches and ideas into breathtaking reality. Construction on the mansion, named Algerian Court, began in June of 1897, resulting in a mansion that showcased arched windows, spired domes, and vibrant tile work. Each of the mansion's 30 rooms featured distinct themes from Louis XV to American colonial. However, it was the Algerian court that stood out, a space of soaring beauty adorned with intricate tiles, stucco cornices, and Turkish lamps. An opalescent and meridian glass dome by the Colonial Art Glass Company bathed the middle hall in ethereal light, creating a magical ambience that captivated all who entered. Despite the mansion's grandeur, the Fenish family resided there for only 7 years before Eva sold it in 1904. After selling their Moorish villa, the Fenish family commissioned architect Robert de Farquhar in 1905 to design a new residence on the same prestigious avenue. Farquhar, an architect with impeccable credentials from Harvard and l'École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, delivered a 2-story Beaux-Arts masterpiece that embodied grandeur and sophistication. The mansion's design was an eclectic blend, reflecting a quote-unquote Italian villa with a decidedly French feeling, according to architectural historian Robert Winter. The mansion's exterior, with its neoclassical elements, stood as a striking contrast to the Victorian houses that populated the neighborhood. The interiors, however, retained a Victorian charm, tailored meticulously to Eva's specifications. Eva and Adalbert's new home was more than just a residence, it was a sanctuary for their diverse interests. The grand estate included a conservatory, a studio, and a laboratory, spaces that facilitated Eva's artistic endeavors and Adalbert's scientific pursuits. The mansion's luxurious interiors were adorned with exquisite furniture, ornate mantels, and lavish table settings that reflected Eva's refined taste. Eva, a patron of the arts, transformed her double-height studio into a cultural salon where artists, journalists, and creative minds gathered. The studio, designed with elegance, was a space where Eva's artistic spirit thrived. Despite not being a professional artist, Eva's watercolors captured the landscapes and architecture of the American Southwest, preserving a unique visual history and playing an important role in her future. After many years of devoting herself to art and traveling around the American Southwest to capture scenes of missions and adobe structures, she decided to immerse herself completely in her passion. In 1926, Eva, along with her daughter and granddaughter, left Pasadena for Santa Fe, New Mexico, leaving behind their lavish lifestyle to focus on art. Eva enjoyed her twilight years, paintbrush in hand, until her passing at 80 years old in 1930. Her husband, who was 14 years younger than her, went on to remarry, but as for their properties, Algerian court's subsequent owner, Frank H. Hamilton, tragically and intentionally set the mansion ablaze for insurance money in 1915. Fortunately, the Fenish estate, as it is known, became the home of the Pasadena Museum of History and has been well preserved for the public's enjoyment. Eva's Sierra Madre house in New Mexico continues to function as a collaborative environment, currently serving as the Women's International Studies Center, where thousands of paintings and photographs are not only archived but preserved with care. Eva's artistic legacy endures through her watercolor landscapes housed not just here, but in museums all across the United States. Did you know that a fortress-like castle once stood in the heart of Los Angeles? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're uncovering the stone towers of Castle York. Hit the subscribe button and let's explore this house. The story of Castle York begins with J.J. Haggerty, a visionary force behind one of Los Angeles' most iconic department store chains. Born in the greater London area in 1860, Haggerty's early years in England offered him little clue to the monumental impact he would eventually have on the world of luxury retail across the pond. Yet like so many ambitious men of his time, he found his calling in America, and Los Angeles became the stage for his rise. By 1905, Haggerty had spent 3.5 years as a department manager and buyer for Jacoby Brothers, one of the most respected department stores at the time in Los Angeles. But Haggerty had larger dreams. He envisioned a store that would stand out, not just for its merchandise, but for its elegance and attention to detail. His solution? The New York Cloak and Suit House, which opened its doors in 1905 in the heart of downtown Los Angeles along South Broadway. The store quickly established itself as a luxury destination. Haggerty knew that selling clothing wasn't just about fabric and fit, it was about experience. Each floor of the 4-story building boasted its own color scheme, enhancing the sense of indulgence and refinement. The first floor welcomed shoppers with fancy goods, while the second floor showcased evening gowns, opera wraps, and suits. The third floor, a millinery haven, complete with dressmaking parlors and art. And for those needing a break from shopping, the fourth floor housed a cafe and restaurant, proving that even in the early 1900s, Haggerty understood the appeal of a full-service retail experience. As Haggerty's reputation grew, so did his ambitions. In 1917, he opened what he referred to as his vision, a new, larger store on the upscale 7th Street shopping district. This time, he dropped the New York Cloak and Suit House moniker, branding the store simply as J.J. Haggerty. The new store was a marvel of modern retail design, boasting a 350-foot-long window display, the first of its kind in LA. J.J. Haggerty's success was built on more than just beautiful storefronts. His department stores were known for their upscale, ready-to-wear selections for women and children. They became destinations for affluent families in other states who would take special trips just to shop at his stores. All of this made him incredibly wealthy, leading him to construct his dream home. Completed in the early 20th century, the mansion, located at 3330 West Adams Boulevard, was a Norman Gothic masterpiece. The sheer scale of the property was awe-inspiring. 125 feet of frontage along the prestigious Adams Boulevard stretching back 500 feet, with the main structure itself measuring an impressive 92 by 91 feet. Every corner of the mansion spoke to Haggerty's vision of elegance, with two majestic towers that crowned the property. These towers framed the mansion, creating a silhouette that could be seen for miles, making it a true landmark in Los Angeles. The interior of Castle York was just as spectacular. The living room, vast and opulent, welcomed guests into a world of luxury, while an organ loft hinted at the sophistication of the home's entertainment. The dining room, designed for lavish gatherings, led to a billiard room where the city's elite could relax and converse. 16 bedrooms provided ample space for family, guests, and of course, Haggerty's servants who occupied their own quarters within the mansion. Unfortunately, Haggerty's journey ended in 1935 with his passing, but his stores lived on under new ownership. Clyde H. De Akers, a former president of Sherman Clay & Company in San Francisco, took over the chain and expanded its reach. A new 4-story location opened on Wilshire Boulevard near Rodeo Drive in 1938, proving that Haggerty's name still carried weight in the world of high-end retail. Unfortunately, the brand lost its competitive edge and the department store shuttered in the early 1970s. As for Haggerty's castle, after JJ's passing, the home was broken up into a rooming house and later demolished following a massive fire. Why would a mansion be moved not once, but twice? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're uncovering the little-known Gilded Age estate of one of the era's most prominent heiresses. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Harriet Pullman was born into extraordinary privilege as the daughter of George Pullman, the 19th century industrialist famous for his Pullman Palace sleeping cars and for being one of Chicago's wealthiest men. The Pullmans' fortune, built on luxury railway travel, ensured that money was never an object in Harriet's upbringing. In fact, when Harriet married Frank Carolyn in 1892, her father gifted the bride a diamond tiara and a staggering $400,000 in cash, a dowry fit for royalty, as newspapers quipped. The wedding itself was an opulent affair. The Pullman family's already impressive Chicago mansion on Prairie Avenue was enlarged with a new palm court, marble terrace, and even a giant conservatory to accommodate the celebration. This glamorous start foreshadowed Harriet's own lavish taste. Moving west with her new husband, Harriet entered San Francisco society as a young socialite. Frank Carolyn hailed from a prominent California family. His father had made a gold rush fortune, but it was Harriet's inherited wealth and flair that truly set the couple up for high living. The Carolyns purchased estates in the Bay Area's most fashionable enclaves, including a sprawling country property in the Santa Clara Valley town of Cupertino. By the early 1900s, Harriet was hostess to glittering fetes at her California Le Petit Trianon, cementing her rise to prominence not just as an heiress, but as a leading lady of West Coast high society. The mansion known as Le Petit Trianon was originally built in 1892 for Charles A. Baldwin and his wife Ellen, a San Francisco couple who established a successful wine-producing estate on the property. The Baldwins named their 137-acre Beaulieu, meaning beautiful place, and indeed it was. They entertained lavishly, constructing a massive stone winery with underground cellars and importing French grapevines, bottling wines under the Beaulieu label that sold as far away as New York and London. This prosperous first chapter set the stage for the estate's next act as Harriet's showplace. Architecturally, Beaulieu's mansion was an homage to French neoclassical design. Noted architect Willis Polk drew inspiration from the grand villas of Versailles, loosely adapting old-world elegance to California's landscape. The result was a miniature palace in the Baroque Revival style. Tall columns, pilasters, and arched windows modeled after Louis XIV's Grand Trianon at Versailles gave the house its name and stately appearance. The symmetry and proportion echoed European royal architecture, albeit on a much smaller scale. The mansion's frame was made of local redwood timber, yet finished with stucco to mimic white stone, creating the illusion of a marble chateau. The house was set amid formal gardens and vineyards. French-inspired landscaping surrounded the home, perfect for outdoor soirees. When Harriet purchased Beaulieu in 1909, she found it the ideal stage for her social ambitions. She and Frank transformed the estate into a hub of Gilded Age entertainment. In September 1909, for example, the Carolins hosted an alfresco gala on the grounds, complete with orchestral music, electric lights strung from the trees, flowing water features, and even fireworks. Surrounded by the mansion's French elegance, elite guests danced and dined under the stars. A few years later, during San Francisco's 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition, Harriet strove to outshine even the railroad barons and silver kings of California. She competed with the illustrious Crocker family in throwing lavish parties for visiting European dignitaries, and Le Petit Trianon proved a perfect venue for impressing these crowned heads of Europe. By all accounts, Beaulieu under Harriet's ownership was a scene of nearly fairy tale opulence, a slice of Versailles transplanted to the orchards of the Santa Clara Valley. Despite the glittering life she created in California, Harriet's personal story took several dramatic turns. In 1913, with ambition soaring even higher, she acquired 554 acres in Hillsborough to build a palatial new estate known as Carolins. This 65,000 square foot French chateau would later dwarf Beaulieu, boasting 95 rooms, a private racetrack, and a staff of 60 servants. And indeed, it was one of the last great mansions of the Gilded Age. However, the very extravagance that defined Harriet's lifestyle also portended troubles. The Carolins' marriage grew strained amidst the construction of the mega mansion. Society pages noted Harriet spending long stretches in New York while Frank stayed on the West Coast. In 1919, just a few years after Carolins was completed, Harriet left Frank, effectively ending their marriage. Frank passed away in 1923, and Harriet made headlines by suing her late husband's estate for over $1 million, claiming much of their property was bought with her money. By this time, Harriet had relocated permanently to the East Coast, visiting California only occasionally, becoming the wife of Colonel Arthur Skimmerhorn, a New York aristocrat, and lived out her later years mainly in New York high society. After Colonel Skimmerhorn passed away in 1933, she maintained a luxurious Park Avenue apartment and an estate in Lenox, Massachusetts. By all accounts, she remained fabulously wealthy and retained her flair for the finer things to the end. Harriet passed away in October 1956 at the age of 87, closing the chapter on one of America's most intriguing heiresses. She had spanned the era of railroad barons and French chateaux, lawsuits and lavish balls, truly living up to the Pullman family maxim that money need never be an object. Harriet's beloved Cupertino estate, Beaulieu, would survive long after its Gilded Age heyday, though not without challenges. In 1940, the mansion and remaining acreage were sold. A quarter century later, as Santa Clara Valley transitioned into suburbia and tech campuses, the old Beaulieu property was acquired for the new De Anza College, which opened in 1965. For a time, the once grand house stood in neglect on the young college campus, and there was even a plan to demolish it in the late 1960s. Thankfully, local history enthusiasts sprang up to its defense. Le Petit Trianon was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1972, recognizing its architectural and historical significance. With preservation grants and community support, the building was saved and carefully restored instead of torn down. In a twist almost as eventful as Harriet's life, the entire house was moved twice. The 300-ton structure was rolled to new locations on campus, first to make way for a performing arts center, then later to accommodate a parking lot expansion. These delicate moves were successful, and by 1982, the mansion had been fully renovated to its former splendor. Today, Harriet's Le Petit Trianon in Cupertino enjoys a quiet but fitting role as the California History Center, a museum and educational facility dedicated to regional history. Rising above Beverly Hills, Greystone Mansion is one of the grandest estates in Southern California, but despite its grandeur, the architectural opulence has been overshadowed by an unsolved crime. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1892, Edward L. Doheny struck oil near downtown Los Angeles, drilling the first successful well in the city. What followed was a flood of oil, profits, and power. Doheny expanded into Mexico, gaining control of vast reserves and amassing a fortune rivaling Rockefeller's. His only son, Ned, born in 1893, was raised in the lap of luxury. After marrying Lucy Smith, a Pasadena socialite, Ned worked in his father's companies and moved comfortably within elite Los Angeles circles. But by the early 1920s, the Dohenys became entangled in the infamous Teapot Dome scandal. Edward Doheny had secretly funneled $100,000 to Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall in exchange for favorable oil leases. It was Ned and his assistant Hugh Plunkett who physically delivered the cash. Although Doheny Sr. was eventually acquitted, the scandal brought stress, scrutiny, and legal threats to the family. In the midst of it all, Doheny decided to build a monumental home for Ned, perhaps as a refuge, perhaps as a symbol of triumph. In 1926, Doheny Sr. purchased land in Beverly Hills and hired architect Gordon B. Kaufman to design a mansion for Ned and his growing family. The estate, named Greystone, slowly shaped into a 46,000 square foot Tudor Revival masterpiece made of Indiana limestone with Welsh slate roofing. Completed in 1928 at a cost of over $3.1 million, it was the most expensive private residence in California at the time. Just to lend some perspective, that would be equivalent to about $58 million today. It towered above the gatehouse, where you would enter the property and begin winding up the drive. And as you did, you would find rolling lawns and a series of gardens, some more natural in appearance, others very formal. These included the lily pond, a secluded water garden under the shade of mature trees, and the cypress walk leading us alongside a massive stone terrace. As we continue wandering about, we find stone paths winding away from us, promising visual surprises at each bend. Atop the terrace, we come across a large fountain set against the Los Angeles skyline. Zooming out, we can see how all of these elements were planned to come together, and how from each angle the estate was designed with a cohesive emerald necklace to frame the main house. Speaking of which, let's pull through the porte cochere to arrive at the entry court. This intimate courtyard is really the crux of the entire property, with each path and drive branching off to a new destination. Inside were 55 rooms, marble floors, carved oak staircases, a grand ballroom, and even a secret Prohibition-era bar near a two-lane bowling alley. Without further ado, let's begin exploring the mansion from the hall, with rich wood cladding the walls below a dazzling Jacobean ceiling. Below the ornate rug, checkered marble floors span the entire hall. And if we look past the arcade, we gain a glimpse of the grand staircase. Let's continue forward. The grand bifurcated staircase continues with those same checkered floors at its landing, but its truly captivating feature is the hand-carved balustrade wrapping the staircase and crowning the lower arcade. Nearby we find the living room, with a hammer-beam ceiling soaring nearly 3 stories overhead. We can take a closer look at the arcade, noting the sheer craftsmanship of the tapered columns and the intricate frieze. To the other end of the hall is the library, continuing with wood paneling set below a barrel-vaulted ceiling bearing similar Jacobean motifs. The next room over is the dining room, where we can imagine the table set with many leaves to host dinner parties of 20 guests or more. This opens towards the breakfast room, where the family would have been more likely to dine when not entertaining. And for as celebrated as the house would be in publications, Greystone would soon become infamous. On the night of February 16, 1929, just months after the family moved in, 35-year-old Ned Doheny was found unalive inside a guest bedroom along with another person, one Mr. Hugh Plunkett. Police quickly determined that Plunkett was mentally unstable and had done them both in. But as details started to emerge, suspicions arose. Why had the Doheny family delayed calling the police after finding the two? Why was Ned buried outside Catholic consecrated ground, as if he'd committed some unforgivable sin? For decades, rumors swirled. Some whispered that Ned had done the deed himself, others suggested a deeper cover-up related to the Teapot Dome fallout. No formal inquest was ever held, and the full truth remains a mystery to this day. Remarkably, Ned's widow Lucy remained at Greystone with her children. In 1932, she even remarried at the mansion. By the 1950s, maintaining the massive estate had become a burden. Lucy sold off much of the land to developer Paul Truesdale, who created what is now Truesdale Estates. In 1956, she sold the mansion itself to industrialist Henry Crown, who leased it out as a film set. When demolition was proposed in the 1960s, the city of Beverly Hills stepped in, purchasing Greystone and saving it from destruction. The estate was later added to the National Register of Historic Places, and today it serves as a public park and a beloved filming location. Greystone has appeared in dozens of movies and TV shows, from Star Trek to Spider-Man, and music videos ranging from Mariah Carey to the Go-Go's. But its real story is stranger than fiction. It's a monument to LA's oil wealth, an unsolved crime scene frozen in time, and a public treasure shaped by one family's rise, fall, and enduring legacy. History is full of interesting characters, but none quite to the likes of Francis Grierson, a mystic musician who played as a psychic pianist for royalty in the 1800s. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're setting off to San Diego to uncover the tantalizing tale of Villa Montezuma. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Jesse Shepard, better known by his pen name Francis Grierson, led a life as colorful as the music he played. Born in England in 1848, his family moved to the American Midwest while he was still an infant. Blessed with prodigious musical talent, he became a skilled pianist in his youth and set out to Europe as a young man to seek his fortune. There, he performed for nobility, from the Tsar of Russia to the Prince of Wales, and gained fame as a psychic pianist, claiming to channel the spirits of famous composers during his concerts. This blend of music and mysticism made him a sensation in spiritualist circles. He was described as tall, dark, and handsome, with an extraordinary vocal range and piano technique that left audiences mesmerized. A turning point in Shepard's life came in 1885 when he met a Danish-born American named Lawrence Valdemar Tonner. Tonner became Jesse's devoted secretary, travel companion, and his life partner for the next 40-plus years. In an era of social taboos, they never publicly labeled their relationship, but they spent most of their adult life living together. By the mid-1880s, Jesse Shepard's fame as an eccentric musical mystic had spread across continents. At the same time, San Diego, California was in the midst of a real estate boom, and the local boosters were eager to attract culture and prestige to their young city. Two wealthy landowning brothers, William and John High, came up with an audacious plan. They would lure the renowned musician to San Diego by building him a magnificent custom home. Flattered by the offer, and undoubtedly intrigued by the idea of having a home built to his own fanciful specifications, Shepard accepted. In 1887, architects Comstock and Trotz were hired to design the mansion, and builders Cheney and Leonard constructed it at a cost of around $19,000, a hefty sum at the time, when ordinary homes in the area cost a fraction of that. An additional $7,000 went into sumptuous stained glass windows alone. Shepard grandly named his new residence Villa Montezuma after the ship the Montezuma that had first brought him as a child from England to America. From the moment it was completed in mid-1887, the Villa Montezuma was a showstopper. It was a Queen Anne-style mansion embellished with exotic architectural flourishes that reflected Shepard's artistic taste. The house featured towers and turrets, bas-reliefs, and even gargoyle-like creatures perched on its eaves, giving it a storybook appearance. Inside, virtually every room was a work of art. The walls were paneled in polished oak and redwood, and ornately encrusted Walton embossed wallpaper adorned the ceilings. The grand staircase was meant to impress from the moment guests entered the house, from an intricately carved newel post to a dazzling web of spindles running up the riser. As we venture deeper into the entry hall, we get a better look at the small details that really make up the space. Across from the grand staircase, we pull back portieres to enter the drawing room. This room is equally as grand, with polished woodwork cladding the walls below a colorful coffered ceiling. We can clear away the clutter to get a better look at the fireplace around, admiring hand fluting, rosettes, and even fleur-de-lis worked into the design of the mantels. However, for as intriguing as the house has been so far, no room could quite compare to the music room. Brilliant stained glass windows paid homage to Shepard's favorite artists and writers, turning the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of color across the interiors. In the grand music room where Jesse entertained, guests could gaze upon glowing glass portraits of Beethoven, Mozart, Raphael, and Rubens, as well as a large window devoted to Sappho, the ancient Greek poet. One especially intriguing stained glass panel symbolically depicted the Orient, and it secretly included Jesse Shepard's own face among its designs, a whimsical self-portrait in colored glass. The fireplace's surround is clad in porcelain tiles, creating a tile mural that is all framed by the solid walnut mantel. Over in the corner, we follow the fresh scent of flowers to find the conservatory, allowing light to flood into the music room. Let's continue exploring now, going even deeper into the house beyond heavy wooden doors. Eventually we find the bedroom, placed precariously on the first floor, a rarity for the times. But perhaps that is because the second floor had a completely alternate use, being mostly reserved for empty space. The lion's share of this level was set aside as a gallery where the couple could display their most prized antiques and artwork away from the clumsy elbows of guests. Living in this palace of the arts, Jesse Shepard wasted no time in making Villa Montezuma the cultural hub of San Diego's high society. He and Lawrence Tonner moved in during the summer of 1887, and almost immediately the mansion became the site of lavish musicales, literary salons, and occult gatherings. By September 1887, after returning from a short trip, Shepard threw open his doors to host his first grand reception in the villa. Contemporary accounts describe how one guest marveled that royalty could be no more grand than the reception Shepard provided. And as for Jesse's music, it defied description. Dignitaries, financiers, and artists crowded into the music room to hear the maestro perform. Amid all this musical and social triumph, Jesse Shepard was undergoing a personal evolution as well. Tucked away in the villa's cozy upstairs tower bedroom, he began to indulge in new creative passion, writing. San Diego's literary scene, though small, welcomed his contributions. He penned essays and prose poems for a local arts journal called the Golden Era, run by an eccentric publisher who, like Shepard, had been enticed to boomtown San Diego with grand promises. It was during the San Diego period that Jesse Shepard decided to reinvent himself as an author under a new name, Francis Grierson. In early 1888, with Villa Montezuma as his sanctuary, he completed his first book of mystical essays. Ever restless and ambitious, Shepard realized he would need to go abroad to truly launch his literary career. And so, in the fall of 1888, after barely a year in his palace, he and Tonner mortgaged the Villa Montezuma to finance a trip to Paris, where Grierson's first book was published. By mid-1889, the pair returned to San Diego only briefly. The great real estate boom had collapsed by then, and the lavish lifestyle they'd enjoyed was no longer sustainable. In December 1889, Jesse reluctantly sold Villa Montezuma, never to live in San Diego again. In 1890, the couple settled in Paris for several years, where Grierson published essays and books delving into spiritualism, the occult, and his own boyhood memories of Lincoln-era Illinois. By 1896, they moved on to London, where Grierson's writings and lectures enjoyed a modest vogue among those fascinated by mysticism and music. Through the late Victorian and Edwardian eras, Grierson and Tonner lived as a devoted unit, part of the cosmopolitan art world, yet always somewhat on the fringes. They finally returned to the United States permanently in the 1910s, as Grierson's star was fading. In 1920, the pair settled in Los Angeles, California, which would be their last home. As the 20th century progressed, tastes changed, and Francis Grierson's once esoteric subject matter fell out of fashion. The public was no longer clamoring for seances or spiritualistic concerts. World War I and modernity had shifted the cultural conversation. Grierson's books, such as The Valley of the Shadows and Modern Mysticism, struggled to find an audience. By the 1920s, the former prodigy who had dined with princes and dazzled San Diego society was living in near poverty in LA. Ever-faithful Lawrence Tonner quietly took over the role of provider, working any job he could to pay their bills. It was a humbling reversal of fortunes for both men, one that could have made them bitter, but by most accounts, they remained devoted and hopeful that a comeback was still possible. In the spring of 1927, an old friend and admirer, the writer Zona Gale, decided to organize a benefit event to help the aging Francis Grierson. At 78 years old, his health was failing, but his spirit was unbroken. On the evening of May 29, 1927, Grierson, accompanied by Tonner, arrived fashionably late as always at a private home in Los Angeles where a small crowd had gathered in his honor. What followed was the stuff of legend. Grierson sat down at the piano, and the years seemed to fall away. He played with the vigor and inspiration of a young virtuoso, charming the audience with anecdotes and music. For his finale, he chose the Egyptian March. As he struck the last resounding chord, Grierson bowed his head and never raised it again. The doctors would attribute it to heart failure, but to those present, it felt like a poetic final act. The mystic musician exiting this life on the final note of his favorite song. Over the ensuing decades, the villa passed through many hands and incarnations. Eventually, it was transformed into a house museum starting in 1972 and has since remained open to the public. What do Katy Perry, a group of nuns, and an old mansion have in common? While this might sound like the setup for a joke, it's more of a preview of things to come. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're heading out to Los Angeles to tour the Earl C. Anthony Mansion. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Earl C. Anthony was a self-made businessman and philanthropist whose entrepreneurial spirit helped shape early 20th century California. Even as a teenager, Anthony was ahead of his time. At age 17, he built one of Los Angeles' first automobiles, an electric car of his own design. This feat in 1897 made Anthony a local pioneer of the horseless carriage era. A few years later, in 1904, he and his father founded the Western Motor Car Company in Los Angeles, selling some of the earliest car brands, and soon secured the coveted Packard automobile distributorship for California. By 1915, Anthony had become the world's most prominent Packard car dealer, eventually selling 1 out of every 7 Packard cars in the world. His automotive empire expanded to include not just dealerships, but also gasoline. His ambitions didn't stop at automobiles. He was equally visionary in broadcasting. In 1922, working from a makeshift setup on his kitchen table, he assembled a 50-watt transmitter and launched radio station KFI AM, which would grow into one of Los Angeles' most powerful radio stations at 50,000 watts. He also started an early FM station and one of LA's first television stations, KFI TV, which is now KCAL TV. By the mid-1920s, Earl C. Anthony was a prominent figure in the National Association of Broadcasters and even served as its president. In short, he was a man equally at the shop under the hood of a car or behind a radio microphone. Beyond business, Anthony had a knack for innovation and civic impact. He is credited with introducing neon signs to Southern California after seeing them in France, forever changing the look of cities like Los Angeles with glowing marquees. He helped found the Los Angeles Auto Show and even had a hand in the development of the Greyhound bus lines by starting an inner-city bus company that later merged into Greyhound. A patron of culture, Anthony stepped in to help save the Hollywood Bowl during the 1930s by leading the symphony under the Stars Foundation. By the 1920s, Earl C. Anthony was one of California's wealthiest and most influential citizens, with success in automobiles, radio, and a portfolio of ventures that made him a true Renaissance man of the West Coast. With great success came the means to build a dream house, and Anthony's dream was anything but modest. In 1927, he commissioned renowned architect Bernard Maybach to design an estate in Los Feliz that would reflect a romantic, old-world grandeur. The result was the Earl C. Anthony House, a sprawling 8-acre compound crowned by a 30,000-square-foot mansion that looks like a slice of Europe transplanted to Southern California. This was Maybach's only architectural project in Los Angeles, and he made it count. The design is an eclectic mix of medieval, Gothic, Spanish, and Tudor elements. In fact, contemporaries describe the residence as a medieval castle due to its turrets, steep gabled roofs, and stonework, all evocative of old-world chateaus. No expense was spared in making this mansion as authentic and opulent as possible. Anthony and his wife traveled to Europe 7 times during the planning and construction, studying Gothic castles and gathering inspiration. They did more than just take pictures, they brought pieces of Europe back with them. The Anthonys imported $35,000 worth of Kenstone from Caen, France, a type of limestone famously used in French castles and cathedrals to give their home an air of old-world solidity. They also imported antique roof tiles from Barcelona, Spain, for an authentic Mediterranean touch. The result was a mansion with genuine European materials integrated into its walls and roof. We'll enter the home through the front door, which is tucked away in the shadows of a massive Gothic archway. This leads us into the entrance tower, a soaring, 2-story space octagonal in plan with Moorish pilasters marking each corner. As we continue through the solid stone interiors, hearing our footsteps echo throughout, we'll step down into the Great Hall. This space continues like much of the house, being clad in Kenstone with large arched windows symmetrically placed on each side. Above us, exposed trusses create coffers filled in with carvings and the faintest hints of multicolored hand stenciling. But the true anchor of this room is the salvaged fireplace surround, soaring well above eye level. Before we continue on, I want to point out one last detail. While the courtyard beyond the windows might steal our attention, there are rosettes carved into the windows and casements that we'd be remiss to pass over. Let's now continue into the next room, peeling back velvet portieres to reveal an antique European tapestry welcoming us to the dining room. Here we begin to lose the details we've already seen. No pilasters, no rosettes, just bold simplicity allowing the Kenstone to speak for itself. But the entire house isn't reduced to stone. The studio is clad floor to ceiling in rich woodwork, boasting a mezzanine lined with bookshelves, though despite the change in material, it does carry on hints of Gothic design. Let's find the first grand staircase and trace its curving balustrade up to the second level as we admire the structural integrity and how perfectly fit together the stone blocks are that support the staircase. Up here we find Anthony's bedroom, finished out with painted wall panels and velvet carpet. Though no guest would have ever seen this space, he still felt it appropriate to display polar skin rugs amongst fine antiques. His bathroom is truly one of a kind, with the opening from the bedroom centered on the bathtub, which is overwhelmed by a tile mosaic depicting flamingos and flowering trees. As a quick aside, each bathroom in the house shares a unique distinction for having intricate tile work, including mosaics and murals. Now back downstairs, we could have found another staircase, one that seems to meander out of sight. This leads us to the guest bedrooms. In this wing, the house remains thematic, with heavy dark wood furniture and pointed Gothic archways to maintain the aesthetic experience for guests. Anthony enjoyed the house until his wife Rosemary passed away. Not long after, in 1950, he sold the mansion and its grounds to Sir Daniel J. Donahue and his wife, Countess Bernadine Murphy Donahue. Anthony himself would live out his remaining years elsewhere, keeping active in business and philanthropy until the end of his life. The Donahues enjoyed the mansion's splendor for roughly 2 decades. Then in 1970, Countess Bernadine Donahue passed away, and the family decided to make a generous, transformative gift. They donated the entire 9-acre estate to the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, a Catholic religious order. In 2015, while the mansion was for sale, pop singer Katy Perry entered the story. Perry, known for her chart-topping hits and her California roots, expressed a keen interest in buying the old Anthony estate from the archdiocese. The nuns, however, disapproved of her lifestyle and refused to sell to her, reportedly for religious reasons, which is wildly illegal in the United States. After years of court battles, the issues appear to have finally cleared up. However, what is not clear is who the current owner is, or if some other arrangement has been made. Perhaps only time will tell. In the present, however, I'm happy to announce that the house is still standing and is very much still in excellent condition. How did a Japanese palace end up on a hill overlooking Hollywood? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are uncovering the history behind Yamashiro. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In the 1880s, the Bernheimer brothers began emigrating to the New World from Germany. They came from a wealthy mercantile family and planned to establish themselves in New York City. Upon arriving, they quickly began growing the Bear Mill Manufacturing Company in Manhattan, a misleading name for a company that manufactured nothing and owned exactly 0 mills. In reality, it was a continuation of their family's mercantile trade. They would ship raw materials to Asia, which would then be converted into fine silks and garments, then shipped back to the US for retail, much in the same way that many retailers structure their supply chains today, just they were way ahead of the trend. This made the brothers incredibly wealthy and required them to constantly travel to countries like China and Japan, where they began collecting Asian antiques. Two of the brothers specifically spent millions of dollars on such things, those two being Adolf and Eugene. They had been born 1 year apart from each other and had been inseparable throughout their entire lives. In 1911, they decided that instead of building homes near each other, they would bring their families together under one roof. In that same year, they purchased a 7-acre hilltop in Hollywood where they would begin planning their duo mansion. They commissioned architect Franklin M. Small to design for them an estate named Yamashiro, which would stand tall above its surroundings, dwarfing all the millionaires' mansions below it. The estate was planned to come complete with lavish gardens radiating from the main house and dotted by pagodas, waterfalls, and walking trails. The brothers wanted their Japanese estate to be as authentic as possible and brought over hundreds of workers from Japan to not only capture the aesthetic, but to employ traditional building methods. When Yamashiro was finally completed in 1914, it became one of the most visible landmarks in the Los Angeles area and could be seen from miles away. In traditional fashion, the home was planned to be viewed sculpturally, with its drive winding about to offer an oblique approach to the gate. From the ground, we find that the gate, garage, and main house weren't centered on each other, but instead were offset to create a sort of feng shui. Being configured this way, the house had no true front nor back, though there was a main entrance which we will see soon enough. First we'll head around to the side that looks out over Hollywood and begin making our way down the stairs to explore the gardens. As we continue from one terrace to another, we pass below the garden gate and continue our descent. Then we turn to the side to find that Hollywood has disappeared and we've been transported to Japan. The village of miniatures is arranged around flowing streams with scaled-down bridges and trees pruned to be an appropriate height. Some of these pagodas were plucked straight from Asia and imported, making them among the oldest buildings in the United States. To understand the true scale, it helps to see how people appear almost as giants as they make their way through the garden. We could spend all day getting lost as we explore the grounds, but the real reason we're here is to tour the house. Let's make our way back up the hill until we see the duo mansion come back into view. Once again, there's no true front or back of the house, so this is as good of a place as any to start our tour. Swinging open the double doors leads us into the hall, clad in intricate woodwork with tile mosaics covered over by fine rugs, and straight ahead, beyond folding Japanese screens, is the courtyard. The courtyard is the true heart of the home, with many rooms opening out into it where we can imagine the two families gathering to walk between wings. One such room that opens out to the courtyard is the tea room, which could be enlarged by retracting the wall of screens. Here we find an Americanized version of zabutons placed about for sitting on, more in bench fashion than in the traditional floor placement. As we travel about the courtyard, we'll see these same themes play out in several of the rooms, including this one, which has an incredibly intricate plaster cherry blossom tree spanning across the ceiling in vibrant painted colors. Though not all the rooms adhere so strictly to the style, as is evidenced by the sitting room. Here we find luxurious but typical seating options for an American home mixed with Asian furniture and decorations. As the brothers' collection grew, they changed out furniture and brought in silk wall panels to cover over the windows. Unlike the popular Moorish smoking rooms of this time period, theirs carried over the same cohesive themes we've seen throughout the house. Though perhaps the most American of the rooms was the dining room, with French doors and traditional wainscoting mixed with imported silk wallpaper. The bedrooms contained a good mix of original Asian antiques along with imaginative furniture to function more as the brothers were accustomed to. While each brother had his own room, they were nearly mere images of each other's save the finishes and decor. In the early 1920s, Eugene unexpectedly passed away, and Adolf couldn't stand to continue living in the house he had built with his brother. He sold Yamashiro and built a new house in Pacific Palisades. Once again, it was filled with antiques, and the grounds were dotted with miniatures. He lived out the rest of his life here, passing away in 1944. Unfortunately, after a few landslides and some redevelopment, this property was all but lost to time. As for Yamashiro, during World War II, conspiracy theories ran rampant through the public as anti-Japanese sentiments spread, leading misguided people to vandalize the estate under the false belief that it was somehow being used to transmit signals overseas. The then owner ended up covering over the building with a false facade before it was converted for use as a military school and then an apartment complex. Thankfully, its next owner uncovered many of the false facades to discover that much of the original finishes were still intact. Since the mid-20th century, it has been renovated and restored and been reimagined as the Yamashiro restaurant, which remains open to this day. Borax has been one of the most popular cleaning products for well over a century, but how much do you know about its origins? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are exploring the Bay Area mansion of the Borax King, a palatial estate with unusual and fabled outbuildings. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Francis Marion Smith, better known as the Borax King, was a pioneering miner and influential businessman whose legacy extends from the barren expanses of the Mojave Desert to the bustling streets of Oakland, California. Smith's journey from rags to riches is a story of grit, ingenuity, and a relentless pursuit of success. His story begins in the small town of Richmond, Wisconsin, where he was born into a modest family. After completing his education at Milton Academy, Smith, driven by the lure of the West, set off at the age of 21 to seek his fortune in the American frontier. His early adventures led him to Nevada, where he stumbled upon a rich deposit of ulexite at Teal's Marsh. This discovery marked the beginning of Smith's long association with borax, a mineral with vast commercial potential. Teaming up with his brother Julius, Smith founded a company to extract and refine borax. They transported their product 160 miles across the Great Basin Desert to the nearest railroad using a 24-mule team, a precursor to the famous 20-mule teams that would later become synonymous with borax. Smith's operations soon expanded beyond Nevada. In 1884, he bought out his brother's share and shifted his focus to Death Valley, acquiring significant borax properties in the region. By 1890, he had consolidated these holdings into the Pacific Coast Borax Company, creating a virtual monopoly on borax production in the U.S. The iconic 20-mule team borax brand emerged from this era, named after the long mule teams used to transport borax from remote mines to railheads. Smith's advertising manager, Stephen Mather, played a crucial role in popularizing this brand, which became a household name and cemented Smith's reputation as the Borax King. Now with the title of Borax King, it was time for him to build a house suitable for a king. In the early 1880s, he purchased 35 acres in Oakland, California, and began planning not only a mega mansion, but extensive grounds to accompany it. Before the mansion was built, work was started on the extensive grounds. As we wind about the property known as Arbor Villa, we will discover some truly fascinating structures and amenities. The first building to catch our eye rises 5 stories above the tree line. This is the observation tower, where Smith could look out across the bay and all of Oakland from the top of the hill. As the months passed, new structures popped up all over the grounds. Let's head into the glass dome building at the base of the observation tower. Here we find the hothouse, filled with exotic plants meant to grow year-round in high humidity. Heading back outside, we'll travel away from these buildings. As we wind about the property, we encounter dirt paths lined with native grasses. Some of these paths lead us to swimming holes, such as this one, while others lead us to water gardens overgrown with lily pads. Never knowing what might be at the end of the next path, let's continue in anticipation. As the trees clear, we find pastures where the groundskeepers were responsible for maintaining the deer and rabbit population, ensuring the property was always teeming with life. Of course, an estate of such magnitude required dozens of groundskeepers who all lived in cottages like this one. As the grounds began to take shape, Smith and his wife opened their piece of paradise to the public for numerous events, including fundraisers to benefit Mrs. Smith's charity, which provided homes to orphaned girls. Finally, 13 years after purchasing the land and developing it into a private park, the house, known separately as Oak Hall, was ready for the Smiths to move in. The 42-room mansion was designed by architect Walter Matthews and cost $275,000 to complete, the modern equivalent of just over $10 million when adjusting for inflation alone. To enter the mansion, we will head up a few steps to find the front door off-center from the porch. Continuing inside brings us to the entrance hall, octagonal in plan and filled to the brim with antiques and artwork. Resting near the base of the stairs, we can look up past the bronze newel-post and peer through the oculus to see the bellows of the built-in pipe organ piercing the ceiling overhead. Before we continue deeper into the mansion, we can pause to admire the smaller details, and while the stair hall might make a grand first impression, it is far from the most impressive room in the house. From the stair hall, we will continue into the music room, doubling as the lesser ballroom. The walls are adorned with intricate murals displaying scenes from antiquity, while hand-stenciled ceilings frame ecclesiastical murals above us. In the bay window, we find a marble statue towering above the gilded piano, where we can imagine a full-time musician gently playing throughout each day. Let's move along to the library, clad floor to ceiling in rich, old-growth wood. Not only is it lit by electric lights, but multicolored light penetrates this cavernous space through stained glass windows above each of the half-height bookcases. Next up is the billiards room beyond a solid wood archway spanning over 20 feet wide. This room continues the same decorative motifs as the library, but with a Moorish flair in its furnishings. This eclectic mix of styles is something we see play out in each room, such as in the dining room, which has a traditional hutch paired with an exceedingly modern dining set for the time, as well as a glass curtain wall. Though some of the rooms are more true to a single style, such as the white and gold salon with gilded plasterwork on the cove ceiling. Let's return to the grand staircase now and make our way up to the second floor. At the landing, we can clearly make out the details of each newel post and notice a band of egg and dart molding on the stepped wall panels, details that might otherwise be lost when the silk wallpaper dominates our visual field. This feeds us into the rotunda, where all of these aforementioned details come together. Directly across from us is the organ loft, and to the side of that is a minstrel gallery where multiple musicians would have been playing their instruments out of sight from guests. Also found around the rotunda is the family dining room, a much more comfortable and relaxed space where the family could enjoy their meals, perhaps more reminiscent of Smith's humble origins. Up here we'll find 15 bedrooms, though we won't look at all of them. The greatest room in the house is yet to be seen, so we'll just see these 3 before continuing along. Finally, we make our way into the great ballroom, which was designed to hold hundreds of guests. Not only is there a stage with professional lighting, but the ceiling overhead is domed with alcoves branching off for more intimate seating areas. Unfortunately, Mrs. Smith passed away in 1905, only being able to enjoy the mansion for 10 years. Mr. Smith, however, remarried and lived out the rest of his life enjoying Arbor Villa in Oak Hall. When he passed away in 1931, the nation was experiencing the Great Depression and no buyers could be found for the estate. Items were slowly auctioned off and the land was subdivided for new construction, but seemingly no one could afford to take care of the mansion. Finally, in January of 1932, Oak Hall met the wrecking ball. Thankfully, we still have this handful of photos to remember Arbor Villa and Oak Hall, one of the most magnificent estates to have ever been built in the Bay Area. In the vibrant city of San Francisco, Templeton Crocker lived a life that could easily be the plot of a Hollywood movie. His story is one of immense wealth, adventurous voyages, cultural contributions, and a touch of personal tragedy. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are uncovering the many mansions of Templeton Crocker. Hit that like button and let's explore this house. Templeton Crocker was born in 1884, the grandson of Charles Crocker, one of the famed Big Four railroad tycoons who laid the tracks for the western portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. This legacy set the stage for a life filled with both privilege and responsibility. Templeton's parents, Fred and Jenny, left him and his siblings a massive fortune, but their early deaths cast a long shadow over their young lives. His mother died shortly after his younger sister Jenny was born, and his father passed away in 1897, leaving the Crocker children to be raised by their grandmother, Adeline Easton. Despite these early hardships, Templeton's childhood was one of luxury. Educated at Westminster School and later Yale, where he befriended the legendary Cole Porter, Templeton inherited his fortune when he turned 21. By then, the family's wealth had grown even further through wise investments, allowing him to live a life most could only dream of. He moved into his father's mansion in Hillsborough, California, which was named Uplands. In 1911, Templeton married Helene Irwin, the daughter of a Hawaiian sugar baron. Their combined wealth was estimated at a jaw-dropping $28 million, the modern equivalent of nearly $1 billion. As a wedding gift, Templeton commissioned architect Willis Polk to design a grand mansion, Uplands II, to replace his father's mansion. The original Uplands was given away for free to a nearby family on the condition that they disassemble and reassemble it nearby. It later went on to be owned by William Randolph Hearst, and was nearly completely demolished to make way for this house designed by Hearst's choice architect, Julia Morgan. The Uplands II estate, completed in 1917, was competitively designed to be the greatest Beaux-Arts-style mansion in the Bay Area. The 45,000 square foot residence cost a whopping $1.6 million, the modern equivalent of nearly $40 million. Originally standing on over 100 acres, the grounds were transformed to include vast lawns and reflecting pools broken up by terraced gardens. The layout of the mansion was anchored around a massive court, with each public room arranged around it and a central gallery. To enter the mansion, we will pull around to the front of the house and make our way below the porte cochere. To one side, the archway captures a perfectly framed view of the manicured landscape. To the other side, we find the elaborate front door. This leads us into the marble vestibule, stretching side to side below a series of groin vaults. From here we will pass through the gallery and under a marble archway. This leads us into the court, doubling as a ballroom. The ceiling was originally fitted with a salvaged 16th century ceiling from northern Italy. The L-shaped drawing room was finished out with parquet flooring and clad with wall panels. Its unique shape was essentially a study by the architect, allowing light to pass in through 3 sides of the house as the day progressed. The dining room walls were clad in split marble panels presenting a gold coloring, which was paired with a ceiling that took artists a full 40 years to carve. After receiving criticism for its classically styled motifs, the architect had some sharp words to rebuke the growing modernist movement, which preferred simple architecture free from ornamentation. Willis Polk was quoted as saying, "Without a purpose to copy or imitate, the architect should, with deep reverence and great respect for precedent, seek inspiration from and give recognition to the definite forms that have been perfected through the centuries of development." The trouble with most modern work is that it shows only too plainly the hasty jumbling together of a mass of detail, obviously purloined by wholesale from the storehouses of time. Such crimes are an indictment against her intelligence. Even with wise words to defend an architectural masterpiece, Templeton's eye began to wander towards the newer, more contemporary architecture of the time, though his fascination was not without respect for the classical. In 1922, he refounded the previously disbanded California Historical Society and led the organization as its first president. But doubling down on his passion for historic architecture still was not enough to satisfy his curiosity. While attending the 1925 Paris Exposition, a flame of passion ignited in him for the emerging and cutting-edge Art Deco design. He was so enamored that upon his return home, he commissioned French designers, including Jean Denon, to furnish a San Francisco penthouse, making it one of the most stunning examples of Art Deco in the United States. After its completion, in 1929, Vogue magazine even declared it perhaps the most beautiful apartment in the world. The dining room table was crafted from thousands of crushed eggshells, all baked in place and lacquered. Many of the walls were clad with sheepskin, while the furniture was crafted from camel and shark skin. In the sunroom, offering views of the bay, he even had an aquarium installed to run below the floors. This new chapter in Templeton's life included a love for adventure and new experiences, which led him to commission the Zaka, a luxurious yacht that became his floating palace while he traveled the world for an entire year, visiting at least 50 ports. But as time went on, the Zaka became more than just a yacht. It was reimagined as a vessel for scientific discovery. Between 1932 and 1938, Templeton hosted several expeditions on the Zaka, collecting valuable specimens and data for institutions like the California Academy of Sciences. Despite his successes, Templeton's life was not without its challenges. His marriage to Helene ended in divorce in 1928, and he faced health issues later in life. He spent his final years in a suite at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco, where he passed away in 1948. From his contributions to the arts and sciences and history, to his luxurious lifestyle and dramatic personal life, he left an unforgettable mark in the footnotes of American history. His penthouse was dismantled over time, with its furnishings and fittings being sold at auctions. However, Uplands 2 continues to stand, not as a private house, but as the Crystal Springs Uplands School. Have you ever wondered what San Francisco would have looked like had the devastating 1906 earthquake and subsequent fires never happened? In a city built almost entirely from wood, what kind of houses line the streets? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are exploring one of the few mansions that survived, giving us an inside look into this forgotten chapter of San Francisco's history. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode of This House. In 1886, long before San Francisco would be reduced to rubble, William Haas built his dream house in the Pacific Heights neighborhood. William came from a wealthy family of merchants. His brother Abraham had founded the company that became Smart and Final, a staple of California's big box stores. Being a part of San Francisco's high society, William had the social responsibility of building a house large enough to host lavish parties. He hired architect Peter R. Schmidt to design for him a rambling Queen Anne with Eastlake influences. When it was finished, the towering abode boasted a whopping 11,500 square feet of interior living space. The facade was masterfully decorated by artists to include striking details, including oversized corbels and finials. But perhaps most striking, sculpted flowers were designed to appear as if though they were breaking free from the tower and gently hovering at the frieze. For all of the exquisite detailing visible from the road, these artisan details were meant to be only but a mere tease of what lied inside. Entering the mansion, we arrive in the stair hall, finished out with rich wood wainscoting skirting the room. The walls are finished out in a deep blue, with tracery framing paintings. In traditional fashion for San Francisco's homes of the era, The main rooms are organized off of the stair hall. Sliding back pocket doors, we will venture into the first parlor, doubling as a music room with a covered piano. If we look closely, the frieze is layered in various patterns below the crown. And as we move throughout the house, these rooms will become even more extravagant. While admiring the warm tones of the second parlor, I'll point out that the house was built nearly entirely from ancient redwoods. Next, we will find the dining room, continuing these warm wood tones with an ornate fireplace called into being by the clean lines of the wainscoting. While there are many more ornate details scattered throughout this room, including built-in cabinets and a buffet, I want to call your attention to the ceiling. As we admire the coffered ceiling, look closely at how each beam is joined, being perfectly fitted with each other, a true testament to the craftsmanship involved in building the house. From the dining room, guests would have meandered back into the stair hall, but we will take a different route. Let's cut through the butler's pantry to better imagine what life in this house would have been like, being able to see the family's china and imagine it set out in the dining room. Of course, no family of status back in this time would have cooked for themselves. Their staff would have been hard at work preparing meals, cleaning, and ensuring that the family never had to lift a finger while enjoying their home. There's still much more to see. Let's return to the stair hall and begin making our way upstairs. Continuing with the same finishes as the stair hall on the first floor, the second floor is flooded with natural light. As we continue exploring, we will find that in a time when indoor plumbing was exceedingly rare, the houses had full bathrooms. Each bedroom is finished out with simple, almost timeless furniture. This particular bedroom, known as the back bedroom, contains stained glass transoms and a glazed tile fireplace. Though Mr. and Mrs. Haas had the most spectacular room in the house. From carpeted floors to fabric wallpaper, no finish was too expensive for the couple to enjoy. Their fireplace is unlike anything we've ever seen on this channel, with a striking, opalescent flare almost glowing in the sunlight. Their children had their own dining room and another room devoted just for their toys. There's even a train room with tracks climbing the walls and traveling across tabletops. As the earthquake hit San Francisco, the house stood strong, perhaps taking less damage than anything else in the area. As fires raged throughout the city, the family watched from their rooftop as San Francisco burned. Fearful for their safety, they were instructed to vacate their house and camp in a nearby park until the flames died down. Thankfully, when the smoke cleared, their house remained completely untouched, standing proudly above fields of rubble. The Haas family lived in the house for the next 3 generations, donating it to what is now known as SF Heritage. While the house museum has been closed for some time, they are aiming to reopen their doors to the public within the next few months.